The story begins in a very hostile atmosphere. Inside a spaceship in space, desperate screams echoed, saying that everyone was going to die. There were bloodstains scattered everywhere while people begged for help. The interior of the ship was filled with strange objects strewn across the floor and walls. Amid this chaos, some soldiers arrived and ordered everyone to gather in the captain's room immediately. However, the captain did not respond, which angered one of the soldiers who wanted to abandon his superior. Even so, soldier number 1 insisted they should save as many people as possible. As they advanced through the destroyed corridors, the soldiers called for survivors. However, when they approached certain sectors, they found countless bodies scattered everywhere, all dead. The scene left the group in shock, but the leader told them to control themselves and ordered them to find any survivors as quickly as possible. During the search, amid a pile of corpses, a hand appeared asking for help. One of the soldiers approached and tried to calm the person, telling them to hold on a little longer. But suddenly a horrible creature appeared holding that hand. It was imitating the human voice to lure victims. The soldier tried to warn his comrades about the monster, but it was already too late. The creature moved with impressive speed, dodging all the soldiers' shots. Then it released a jet of acid that hit the faces of some of them, melting them. One of the soldiers watched in panic as the monster devoured the body of one of his friends. Trying to react, he grabbed a bomb to sacrifice himself and kill the monster along with him, but the creature gripped his hand tightly. On the monster's shoulder there was a pink slime that absorbed the bomb and made it explode inside itself, killing the soldier too. The alien, coldly, walked up to a security door. It used the hand of one of the dead soldiers to try to unlock it, but the system denied access because it did not recognize the user. In response, the pink slime handed another bomb to the alien, who used the explosion to blow open the door. Inside that room, there were 2 people hiding, trying to survive. The alien, now clearly identified as a hostile alien life form, advanced to devour everything it found, growing larger and larger. The scene then shifts to another point in the universe. In a cold metal cargo compartment, someone reflects on his own situation. He admits he had no choice but to turn into an alien life form in a survival game. In this game, you had to choose from various space races to evolve. It was a survival RPG where you could develop different species with varied strategies. He remembers that in other runs he had been a metallic gremlin, a mutant monster that ripped enemies apart in one-on-one fights, and even a psychic hive leader who conquered planets. Despite testing many terrifying cosmic creatures, he confessed he had only truly grown attached to one specific race. It was an unidentified special aggressive metamorph, a creature inspired by horror movies like Alien X. This race had a unique ability to grow infinitely by absorbing the genetic information of its victims. Although it seemed extremely powerful, its initial difficulty was brutal because surviving at the beginning was almost impossible. Moreover, it lacked resources to cooperate or communicate with other races, making it one of the worst options in the game. Even so, that race became his favorite. He liked the freedom to evolve however he wanted and the absurd strength that depended only on the player's choices and desires. So he started the game as this initial metamorph. The system displayed his status as a hatchling and defined the main objective: survive. His only ability was hypersense. Upon realizing this, he regretted a little choosing that creature. He admitted it was his fault for being such a fan of Alien X, but he knew he could not worry about that now. He began feeling intense itching while shedding his skin, something he had not imagined would be so uncomfortable. He knew he needed to feed quickly because the hunger was unbearable and left him vulnerable. Looking around, he concluded he was on a ship belonging to a mega corporation or perhaps a stellar union. He was certain that if he was captured at that moment, he would be killed without hesitation. He then activated his hypersense, scanning the entire ship to try to find food. He quickly detected the location of the food storage. When he got there, he found it locked with a password. Using his hypersense again, he discovered the combination was just 1, 2, 3, 4. As soon as he unlocked the compartment, he found several protein bars. He began devouring them all, even though they tasted like rubber. Despite the horrible flavor, he at least managed to get some essential nutrients to stay alive. While he was eating, a cockroach ran past him. Without realizing it, he moved his tail and killed the insect. Instinctively, he devoured the cockroach and then received a notification saying the hunting effect had been activated. He had gained the cockroach's genetic fragment, which granted him wings. He felt lucky to get that fragment so early since that genetic core would let him operate like an amorph. He knew that the more genetic data he collected, the more he could evolve his organism. When he accepted the new ability, he felt wings sprout from his back. At first, he had difficulty moving them, but soon realized he just needed to use his trapezius muscles. With that, he managed to flap his wings and fly. However, he soon felt intense hunger. The energy consumption for flying was much higher than he had expected. He understood that to use the wings effectively, he would need a special trait that reduced energy consumption. He then defined his first goal as gathering a set of traits that would give him an advantage. Determined, he went around the ship hunting cockroaches. One by one, he devoured them, counting until he reached the 21st. After eating so many, he already thought they tasted like burnt pancakes. The system notified him that he had acquired the chitinous exoskeleton trait, which increased his defense as he leveled up. Although it was a good ability, it was not useful to him at that moment. What he really needed was robust vitality, which reduced energy consumption and slowed aging. He knew that many insects and plants had this trait, and that it would be essential to control his constant hunger. He then concluded he would need to eat a huge number of cockroaches to get what he wanted. He changed locations on the ship to find more prey. When one cockroach tried to escape, he quickly caught it with his tail and devoured it. Finally, he obtained the much-desired robust vitality. His body underwent a slight transformation that made him better prepared to survive. At that moment, he reflected that the ship's crew and humanity itself were enemies. From the footsteps he heard in the corridors, he realized he did not have much time before being discovered. He needed to evolve as quickly as possible to avoid a grim future. He decided it was time to leave that cargo compartment and take his first step toward expansion. He thought about where he could go and concluded that the destination was already decided. He chose to head to the cooling room near the reactors. It was an important area, but with little human activity. If he could not establish himself there, he could even damage the reactor to get rid of the humans. He entered the ductwork to reach his destination, but was quickly pushed back by the force of the internal airflow. He felt fear because he knew he could be crushed or cut by the fan blades. Carefully, he assessed the situation. He knew that if he damaged the fan, the humans would discover him, so he needed to fly through it. He used his metamorph abilities to focus as much as possible. After analyzing the airflow and the movement of the blades, his brain signaled the right moment to act. Without hesitation, he jumped with force and barely managed to pass through, almost losing his tail in the process. Relieved, he continued on his way. As he advanced through the ducts, he found a spider and devoured it immediately, adding more genetic data to his repertoire. Then he heard human voices talking in a laboratory. One of them asked about the result of test subject 026. Another replied that it had been a failure. A man commented that the leader would be furious, but another reminded him that the captain was from Earth and had his hands tied. They ended their shift for the day, leaving the place silent. He reflected that this ship was not just ordinary transport, but rather a research facility run by a mega corporation. He knew that mega corporations were powerful factions in the solar system made up of human Terrans. They dominated entire nations and replaced traditional governments, usually with materialistic values. Megacorp in particular was notorious for its cruel practices, such as turning healthy people into slaves. He thought that if these corporations did that in the game, they were probably even worse in real life. For the moment, he decided only to explore the environment, aware that what he found could change his fate. If the facility was designed to create mutant super soldiers, he might acquire a more resistant body and combat abilities. If they were researching psychic powers of a special elf-like race, he could gain mental abilities, something he had always dreamed of having. As he advanced, he heard a weak voice asking for help. Investigating, he found a slime being tortured, clearly in pain. He used his hypersense to analyze the situation and discovered that the slime was being electrocuted, defenseless, and at the mercy of the humans. He then used his hypersense to scan the area and noticed that pressing a specific button would end the experiment. Without hesitation, he activated the command, ending the slime's suffering, which silently thanked him for being saved. Soon after, he heard footsteps approaching and quickly hid in the shadows. At that moment, a woman appeared along with her cat. She questioned the researcher about when test subject 26 would yield results. The man, visibly nervous, asked for more time, but she reminded him that time meant credit and they needed results to present to the company before reaching their destination. She warned him that without progress, the company might reconsider his position. The pressure left the man desperate, begging for any solution to avoid losing his job. She called him Researcher 80 Wei and explained that she did not want it to come to this, but she was also counting on him. She said that if he produced results, he would be guaranteed a promotion to research leader or at least a stable position. In addition, she mentioned that if the plan worked as expected, they could secure commercial ties with Mars, which was showing great interest in the project. The man asked if they could administer selonium, a drug developed by the Stellar Union to wake test subjects. He explained that the drug had not yet been fully tested. Even so, she ordered him to use it immediately. The researcher hesitated, saying that without the proper neutralizer it could be dangerous. But after arguing, he decided to start the application with just d.01 mgs. He began increasing the dose slowly, moving to 3, then 5, and even 7 milligrams. When it reached that amount, the slime finally reacted. Excited by the response, the woman said they could now increase the dosage even more. Despite the researcher's reluctance, she herself pressed the button to deliver more of the drug. The slime screamed in pain, begging for help while it suffered shocks and mutations under the cold gaze of the woman who watched everything without showing emotion. After the experiment, the slime's appearance had changed completely. She considered the results interesting and ordered further tests, demanding detailed reports on all reactions. At that moment, she felt something watching her. She looked around but saw no one. The amorph, hidden, watched everything and considered that act unforgivable. He swore that woman would soon be dead for her cruelty. The scene shifted to the amorph building its nest. He used his hypersense to map the entire environment, feeling that the ship was now part of himself. He understood that information was essential to win any war. With this, he could track every movement of the enemies. On his 4th day as an amorph, he finally completed the nest. He positioned himself between the nest and the cargo hold, devouring as many cockroaches and spiders as he could to strengthen himself. At the same time, he gathered all the information he needed about the ship and its occupants. He noticed that the woman always followed the same routine. Her name was Kisaragi Yujin, leader of the research team in that location. Despite having a frail body, she was extremely important to the ship's operations and therefore represented a direct threat to his survival. He remembered an incident that had happened 2 days earlier when an experiment managed to escape. Amid the chaos, she had built a tracking device in just a few hours that allowed them to recapture the test subject. He admired her intelligence and even wondered if she possessed psychic abilities like those of the elf race, known for powers such as telepathy and mind control. Although humans occasionally were born with psychic potential, to him it did not matter whether she was talented or not. The important thing was that she was always accompanied by soldiers armed with advanced equipment. Confronting her directly would be suicide. While devouring some protein bars, he developed a new ability, paralyzing venom. For him, with a small and fragile body, it was perfect. A single drop could immobilize an adult human for several minutes. Even so, he recognized that it would be complicated to use it with armed soldiers around her. The scene then shifted to the amorph visiting the slime again. He noticed the slime seemed better than the day before and brought food for him. The slime showed happiness at being fed. The amorph reflected that in the game, slimes usually did not have special abilities. He was curious if this one was a unique specimen, or if the species had changed over time. At that moment, he remembered that Kisaragi had a cat to which she seemed extremely attached. He thought that if something happened to the cat, he might find her weak spot there. Unlike her, the cat spent most of its time alone. The amorph then decided he would use the animal as bait. He hid in the ducks and watched it for a long time. He discovered that the cat's name was Caesar. He also noticed it was even a little fat from eating all the premium meat its owner gave it. So Kisaragi was not a bad person. Meanwhile, the amorph analyzed the duct entrance. Although it seemed easy to invade, his hypersense warned him it was covered in laser sensors. Any interruption would trigger the alarm immediately. Annoyed by this difficulty, he ended up bumping and making noise in the duct. The cat in the area heard the noise and came closer to investigate. Soon after, some soldiers rushed in to see what was happening but concluded it was just the cat causing trouble. Even so, the amorph was badly startled when the cat stared so closely at him, almost dying of fright from the scare. After narrowly avoiding being discovered, he started thinking of a better plan. He noticed the cat seemed bored and got an idea. He decided to use a cockroach to attract the animal. He took the insect to the duct, which immediately caught the cat's attention. The cat went after the cockroach and ended up pulling the duct grate loose. Again, the soldiers heard the noise, but one of them remarked it was probably just the cat again, so they did not bother checking. The amorph then created a trail of cockroaches, leading the animal along a specific path. At the end of the trail, he was already waiting. When the cat got close enough, he used his tail to inject the paralyzing venom into the animal. The cat screamed in pain when it was hit. Without hesitation, the amorph bit the cat's skull hard enough to crush it. He remarked to himself how tasty the meat was, not caring about the cruelty of the act. Elsewhere on the ship, some soldiers went to talk to Kisaragi. She wanted to know when she would see the cat again. The captain explained that the soldiers were searching for it, but she was extremely angry. She said they had been looking for hours and that the cat had a set time to eat, so something bad might have happened. The captain replied there was no way the cat could have escaped the ship since it was an enclosed, controlled environment. She insisted that for that very reason she wanted them to find it quickly. The captain asked her to wait for results. However, he thought to himself that the woman seemed crazy for making such a fuss over a cat. If she had not been from the capital, he would have locked her in solitary for causing so much trouble. The situation became even more tense when Kisaragi demanded that the soldiers who had let the cat escape be executed. The captain was shocked by the request and could not believe what he was hearing. Everyone around was horrified to realize she truly wanted to kill soldiers over an animal. She justified it by saying everything had happened because of their incompetence. Trying to defuse the situation, the captain said he understood how she felt and promised he would use the incident to reinforce discipline among the troops. Even so, Kisaragi was firm and declared she would return in 2 hours. She warned that if there were no answers by then, he should resign his post as captain. As soon as she walked away, the captain began wondering where that damn cat was. Meanwhile, hidden in the ducts, the amorph reflected with satisfaction that the cat was already in his stomach. He realized he had gained a new trait called Wild Sense, though he did not know exactly where it came from. The system he used explained that there was a feature fusion mechanism. He could combine related abilities to form a more powerful version. The amorph remembered that, from playing that game so much, he had memorized several fusion formulas. When he hunted the cat, a notification appeared. He was surprised because it was an ability he had never seen before. The system explained that Wild Sense could be fused with the Hypersense he already had. When he did so, Predator Instinct was born. This new trait made his Hypersense even sharper. He could now sense imminent threats, something comparable to the instinct of great hunters who seem to predict the future. He tried to activate this new power but noticed that the prediction effect did not appear. He then suspected it was a passive ability that would only trigger in the face of a real threat. He decided he would analyze this trait better later to understand its limits. He also wondered if Kisaragi was already completely losing control. He watched her and realized she really was totally unhinged. Amorph reflected that everything was going exactly as he wanted. He had achieved his second objective, creating a barrier of tension between Kisaragi and her soldiers. He knew the soldiers already did not like her cat very much, since they had seen the animal eating better food than theirs. That alone was enough to generate resentment. He concluded that the situation stirred up natural feelings of anger and revolt, even more so because Kisaragi belonged to the upper class of the Megacorp, a noble from the capital. For the soldiers, tolerating that difference in treatment was an absurd injustice, something that planted the seeds of internal conflict that he intended to exploit even further. The soldiers began to take out the anger they felt for Kisaragi Eugene on that cat. But now that the animal had disappeared, the atmosphere grew even tenser. They wondered what they would do from there and felt the frustration of having to search for a cat they actually hated. Failing at something so simple was humiliating for them, and it was eating away at everyone's patience. Meanwhile, Amorph wondered whether those soldiers would still be able to protect Kisaragi Eugene with the same dedication as before. He also knew she no longer trusted them, since in her mind the cat had escaped because of their incompetence. For Amorph, this was perfect. He mentally thanked the cat, thinking it was now time to move on to the next step of his plan, obtaining Kisaragi Eugene's genetic fragments. At that moment, Kisaragi Eugene was so consumed by rage that she was taking it out cruelly on the lab test subjects. She approached Experiment Eero-26, a fragile slime, and with a disturbing smile began electrocuting it. Amorph, watching from a distance, felt his anger growing inside. He realized there was no point in trying to talk or act subtly anymore. He knew the slime didn't need help or comfort, but rather revenge. Meanwhile, Kisaragi Eugene went to see the captain to demand results. She reminded him that 2 hours had already passed since she had given the ultimatum. The captain replied that they had only just begun the search, trying to explain. Irritated, she called the captain by his full name, Samuel Yu, making it clear she was questioning his authority. She wanted to know if he was defying the will of a noble from the capital. Samuel Yu held his ground. He stated that he was the captain of that ship and warned Kisaragi Eugene to be careful with her arrogance. She fired back, saying she could easily remove him from his position. Even so, he replied that he would not accept being intimidated, no matter if she was from the capital. There was clear tension between them, a sign that conflict had already been brewing. Next, Kisaragi Eugene left the room with a group of soldiers. She said she was going to the bathroom, and one of the soldiers remarked that he also needed to go quickly. Amorph realized at that moment that this was his best opportunity. Normally, the guards should have accompanied her, but they were so stressed and irritated that they let her go in alone. In addition, one of the guards really did step away to use the bathroom, which weakened security even further. He hid and waited. He knew there were no security devices installed in the bathroom, making it the perfect place for an ambush. He watched Kisaragi Yujin inside, evaluating her every move. He kept repeating to himself that he could not waste this chance. Decided, he entered the bathroom stealthily, preparing his lethal poison. At that instant, Kisaragi Yujin felt something strange. Her instincts warned her of the danger. When she looked up, she saw Amorph already launching his attack. She managed to dodge at the last moment, but he used the walls to gain momentum and drove his tail into the back of her neck. The poison began to paralyze Kisaragi Yujin's body immediately. While she was immobile but still conscious, she saw the creature approaching, drooling with anticipation. Amorph wondered what might be going through her mind at that moment and whether she would feel fear upon realizing there was no escape. But to him, it did not matter at all. He knew her death was certain and inevitable. He advanced without hesitation, biting down on her head until he crushed it completely. During the brutal act, he felt the flow of genetic information passing into him. As he absorbed that data, he confirmed that his suspicions were correct. Immediately afterward, the system appeared before his vision, asking if he wanted to evolve. The moment he thought about confirming the evolution, he was seized by a strange, sudden vision, soldiers bursting into the bathroom and riddling his body with bullets. He panicked and wondered what was happening until he realized it was the effect of his new ability, Predator's Instinct. That power let him foresee imminent dangers. He understood that time was against him. A guard would arrive there at any moment, and he would have no choice but to kill that man as well. When the soldier entered the bathroom, he was startled to see Kisaragi Yujin's body on the floor. But before he could react or shout, a morph leapt on him and sank his fangs into his neck, killing him quickly. Even so, he did not feel safe. He thought about how much time he had before others arrived and wondered if Kisaragi Yujin carried any tracking device he had not detected. He decided there was nothing else to do there. He needed to leave immediately. He ran back to the place he called his nest, a hideout in the vents where he could hide for a while. When he got there, he opened the system again and confirmed his evolution. The system announced that the process had been activated. At that moment, Amorph's skin began to melt and change color. His entire body underwent a painful and intense transformation until he was completely enclosed in a thick, resistant cocoon. Inside the cocoon, he felt everything changing. It was as if something was sucking away his old form and replacing it with something new. He wanted to open his eyes to see what was happening but could not move. Gradually, he lost all control over his body. Inside the cocoon, he understood there was nothing more he could do. All that was left was to wait for the evolution to finish. After some time, Amorph finally began to emerge from the cocoon. His appearance was completely different. Now he was taller, stronger, with 4 arms and much darker, more resistant skin. He felt power flowing through his new body, realizing he had advanced another stage in his evolution. Meanwhile, in another part of the ship, the scene shifted to the medical wing. The team leader was asking if they had already determined the cause of Kisaragi Yujin's death. One of the doctors replied that the apparent cause was a deep cut to the throat, probably made by a small blade, and that a full autopsy would be needed to be sure. The doctor asked what they should do next, but the captain admitted he did not know. Then he turned to the head of security to ask about the progress of the investigation. The security officer explained that they had reviewed all the cameras on the ship, but nothing suspicious had been recorded. For that reason, the main suspect at that moment was the guard who was being interrogated. They asked if he really believed the guard was the killer. The security officer replied that, based on the information he had, he very much doubted it. The captain sighed and reminded everyone that they all knew very well what had happened recently in the lab. He spoke about one of the most promising employees who had his brain ripped out while still alive just for disobeying the lead researcher. That served as a clear warning. Anyone who defied orders could meet a horrible fate. The captain asked what punishment they thought awaited whoever was deemed responsible for the death of a noble from the capital. He made it clear that if they did not want to die in a cruel way, they needed to find a solution. Suggestions came up. One man mentioned they could claim the death was an accident during an experiment. But another rejected the idea, saying there were too many researchers involved and it would be impossible to ensure they all gave the same testimony. Someone suggested making up that she died from eating spoiled food, but everyone realized that would be political suicide. The tension increased, leading to a confused argument with no one able to reach a consensus. Then another man entered the room and ordered them to stop the commotion immediately. He informed the captain that they were approaching planet CO8. He explained that CO8 was known for being the territory of the Space Dogs, a feared group of pirates. The captain understood the gravity and asked if the man was saying they had gotten into trouble with them. The man confirmed it, explaining that with all the chaos on board, they hadn't noticed before. The space dogs were notorious enemies of Megacorp, known for traveling the cosmos and looting everything they could. They had vast experience in fleet combat, and even ships commanded by veterans suffered heavy casualties. For a research vessel like theirs, encountering the space dogs would be an absolute disaster. But the man suggested that if they reported an attack by these pirates, they could use it to cover up Kisaragi Yujin's death. The captain considered the idea valid, since they did not have the weaponry to face the pirates for real. The man said he had old contacts among the pirates and could speak with them. The captain was surprised to learn about those ties and asked about the cost and details of the plan. The man estimated it would cost at least 100 million credits, because Kisaragi Yujin was important enough that even the pirates would not want to get in trouble over it. The captain accepted the plan but made it clear that the man would have to handle all the details himself. One of the others asked what they would do with the bodies. The captain decided they would keep them until the space dogs arrived, ordering that no one else was to go near them to avoid problems. While all this was happening on the ship, a morph was reflecting on his new form. He realized he was now in the larva stage and felt the intense change in form. Before, he could survive hidden in the dark, but now he knew he needed to hunt to stay alive. He carefully considered his next goals. The system appeared before him, informing him that he had unlocked a new ability called Acid Blood. It also explained that his species evolution had 6 stages: hatchling, larva, pupa, young adult, adult, and ascension. Reaching ascension was the equivalent of beating the game Space Survivor. Getting to that point did not just mean reaching maximum power, but also unlocking the secret of the Metamorph's origins, revealing who they really were and where they came from. He remembered that very few people had ever seen the end of a species. Only 20 players, including himself, had managed to achieve that feat. He knew it was extremely difficult. As he analyzed his new characteristics, the system offered the option to see the list of evolutionary types. He accepted. He saw that his physical enhancement was at 6 out of 10, while psychic enhancement was at 1.5. He was not surprised by this, since he knew he was close to meeting the requirements to strengthen the physical side even more thanks to his reinforced exoskeleton and acid blood. The system explained that evolutionary types worked similarly to other races' classes, but were more specific, activated only under special conditions, and could grant synergy bonuses when combined. But there was something that intrigued him. He did not understand where that extra 0.5 in psychic enhancement came from. He prided himself on always consuming his prey completely, leaving nothing behind. Then he remembered Kisaragi Yujin. She had been the only one whose body he had not devoured completely. Amorph began to realize he had been right in his suspicions about Kisaragi Yujin. He had suspected she possessed psychic powers, and everything suggested it was true. He thought he really did need her body, so he would have to find it as soon as possible. As he crawled through the ducts, he noticed they were now tighter for him. His body had grown considerably since the last evolution, making it harder to move through the narrow spaces. Even so, he kept advancing until he caught the smell of the bodies. When he detected that strong, rotten odor, he began drooling involuntarily. He knew he had finally found the place where the corpses were being stored. Beneath his feet was the makeshift morgue where they rested. Down below, a man on patrol was commenting about the terrible smell coming from there. He found a hole in the floor, corroded by acid. But in the ceiling, hidden among the shadows, a morph was already waiting. Without giving any chance to react, he attacked quickly, piercing the man's head and killing him instantly. After that, he was able to examine the bodies calmly. He found Kisaragi Yujin's body. He noticed that, since she was nobility from the capital, her body was still intact. The soldiers had been ordered not to touch her. He held her head for a moment, reflecting. He thought it was strange how he could kill so many people without feeling any guilt. He kept wondering whether he had been corrupted by being a metamorph, or if he had always been this kind of cold-blooded killer. In the end, he decided there was no point in thinking about it because nothing would change. He knew that for metamorphs, devouring the dead was simply the natural course of life. The body returned as food, nourishing those who survived. With that in mind, he began to devour Kisaragi Yujin without hesitation, accepting that this was how a metamorph had to live and adapt. During the process, he spat out something he found in her heart. It was a strange device. He looked at it, not really understanding what it was for. He suspected it was some problem with her heart, so he simply destroyed the object, crushing it without thinking much more. Soon after, the system appeared before him and confirmed what he suspected. Kisaragi Yujin really did have psychic powers. The system informed him that he had acquired the ability Psychic Perception and asked if he wanted to activate it. Amorph was not very satisfied with the reward. He thought the ability was almost useless, since metamorphs could naturally use psychic powers without needing that specific perception. Even so, he decided to accept the trait to meet the requirements needed to unlock new evolutionary types. When he activated the ability, he felt some tendrils forming in his head. He found it curious and thought that maybe he could combine this new trait with others later to get something truly useful. He continued his work. He picked up one of the arms from another body and used a machine nearby to help manipulate it. He planned to finish devouring the body of the guard he had killed earlier. After consuming the bodies, he realized that the guard's shifts had changed. He observed that they did not use much protection inside that ship. He began to wonder whether the doctor he had killed would also be replaced soon. He knew that as soon as the replacement arrived and saw the state of the place, they would realize there was a monster loose on the ship. He reflected that he still was not strong enough to handle a direct and prolonged fight against everyone there. He needed to buy time, grow, and evolve even more before taking bigger risks. Looking at the hole he himself had opened with acid, he had an idea. He was in a morgue full of preservatives and chemicals spread around. He imagined creative ways to use that to his advantage, thinking about how to turn the environment into a trap or cover for his actions. At this point, the narrative changed scenes, showing Megacorp's center of power. Although there was no official declared capital, there was a place everyone recognized as such: Earth, the administrative headquarters of Megacorp. This planet was ruled by 5 powerful families who had helped found the corporation, acting like kings over the territory. Among these families was the Eugene family, whose roots came from a region once called East Asia. They had started as a small company in South Korea and now dominated the entire territory, turning it into their private residence. To maintain comfort and status, they had installed private planes, magnetic levitation trains for fast transportation, and even an artificial sun to sustain the lower ecosystem. Millions of workers lived there as obedient instruments to keep everything running. The scene then showed a man cultivating the land, appearing humble, but soon 2 men in suits approached to deliver a message. One of them explained that it had taken time to locate the important man and that they needed to speak with him urgently. They said that Ms. Kisaragi Yujin, the 3rd daughter of the family, had her transmitter completely destroyed. The man in white, who had seemed calm until then, reacted with brutal coldness. He said it was impossible that this had happened because he did not overburden Kisaragi Yujin with too many tasks. He was informed that the last signal from the transmitter came from an area near Sector CZ08, known to be the territory of the Space Dogs. At that moment, the gentle man changed completely. He killed the messenger violently, showing a cold and controlled fury. After that, he ordered the other men in suits to clean up the mess, explaining that he did not need tools that asked questions he had not requested answers to. He calmly explained that the cost to create Kisaragi Yujin had been enormous, around 1 billion credits, comparable to the value of a prototype warship. It also included advanced genetic modifications. He questioned how mere pirates dared to lay hands on something so precious to the Yujin family. Then he asked if the ship Kisaragi Yujin had been on was commanded by Samuel Yu. An old man next to him confirmed that it was. He commented that Samuel Yu's family was near Titan, one of Saturn's moons. He said that although they were interested in that land, it was not their doing because he considered the leader of that family a coward without the courage to confront the Eugene directly. Finally, he looked at the old man and asked what he thought of the whole situation, wanting to hear an opinion that could confirm his own plans or fears about what would happen next. The old man calmly explained that he already suspected the involvement of TC. The chief agreed, saying great minds thought alike. Although it looked as if TC and Egerton, Samuel's family, were fighting for control of Jupiter, in reality they had been conspiring together for a long time because Egerton's credits came from TC. He explained that that snake was planning to seize control before the council meeting and asked if the old man knew about it. The old man confirmed, saying that the leader of the TC family, Chamberlain, wanted the CEO position that was exactly his. The chief commented that that arrogant brat clearly had him in his sights and said they now had justification to strike first. He then ordered the old man to inform the whole family, since they had an integrated shadow close to CO8, and asked him to contact those people to resolve everything. The old man understood but reflected that there would be bloodshed. Even so, the chief insisted that they bring everyone without exception, including Samuel, to his feet, stating that all those who had damaged his property deserved death. The scene shifted to inside a spaceship, where the captain was horrified as he asked what had happened there. A soldier explained that he had seen a bit of smoke, went to check if there was a fire, and wanted to enter immediately, but only medical staff were allowed to do that. He He commented that he couldn't understand how there could be a fire if there were bodies inside. The man asked if those were all the bodies, and a woman replied yes, questioning why he was asking. At that moment, the chief of the medical team was horrified and asked the captain to gather all the team leaders immediately because something terrible had happened. In the meeting, the captain could not believe that the lead researcher's body was missing. He questioned the chief of the medical team, who stated he had checked all the bodies multiple times and confirmed that 2 were missing. He explained that, given the chemicals, a fire could technically occur, but it was very rare. The risk leader then summarized by saying that, in other words, it was a criminal incident. Everyone started wondering who could do such a thing, and one man even suggested it might be an alien organism. The head of supplies was shocked and asked if he was joking, but soon everyone agreed that the most important thing now was that the lead researcher's body was missing. The question arose whether they should call on the pirates from CZ-08. The captain said they needed to find the body as quickly as possible, but that first they had to identify the culprit. Completely nervous, he said that if they were afraid of retaliation from the noble capital, they should cooperate with him. He asked the risk leader if he had already contacted the capital, and the leader confirmed that he had right after the meeting. The captain ordered them not to mention anything about what had happened and to just find the body immediately, reminding the chief of security what he needed to do. He stressed that the culprit had to be found at any cost. The chief of security replied that he was already doing his best, but the captain shot back that it wasn't enough and threatened to strip him of his authority and respect if he couldn't solve it. Meanwhile, a morph was hiding in the ducts, watching and thinking that everything was going exactly as he had planned. He reflected on how no one would suspect that an alien would mix chemicals in a morgue to start a fire. After mixing the chemicals, he had even used a few drops of his acidic blood, ensuring the bodies would be destroyed efficiently. Amorph admitted to himself that he hadn't expected anyone to mention the possibility of an alien being involved, and realized that the risk team leader had taken charge of the investigation. He suspected he might be working with the pirates, which would be interesting since the pirates were from many races, and he could get lots of different genes. Even so, he noted that the genetic fragments he could get on that ship would be fewer than expected because of the attack. Suddenly, he noticed someone approaching. It was the head of the supplies department. Since he had no direct involvement in the incident, Amorph found it strange that he seemed so worried. He watched as the man, looking nervous, glanced around and entered the cargo hold. Amorph reflected that, as head of supplies, he was authorized to be there, but his overly cautious behavior seemed suspicious. He then wondered what kind of secret the man might be hiding and followed his trail to a container with much tighter security than the others. The walls were so thick that even Amorph's hypersense couldn't see through them. He thought the contents had to be something very important. Originally, he had planned to target the chief of the medical team, but he changed his mind and decided the next target would be the head of supplies. Meanwhile, the scene showed the head of the supplies department drinking too much. One of the men even asked him to slow down. In his thoughts, the man lamented, feeling ruined ever since he had trusted the promises of a black market cult member. He had been tempted by the idea of selling something rare he had found in ancient ruins. It had seemed easy and profitable until the day of the deal, when he had secretly transported the eggs. Unfortunately, one of them had fallen, and he knew that if he had just closed the container door properly that day, none of this would have happened. The head of supplies told himself he couldn't tell anyone. If the captain found out, he was sure he would be killed. To try to forget, he asked for another drink, but the bartender said they were already closed. Even so, he insisted, asking for just one more so he could leave, and the man eventually agreed. After drinking, he staggered through the ship's dark corridors, completely drunk, questioning where he had gone wrong in life. Suddenly, he heard a step and, startled, asked who was there. At that moment, he saw Amorph's feet running across the floor. He panicked and bolted, begging for his life. He quickly typed the password and managed to get into a room, saying he needed to talk to someone immediately. However, Amorph managed to force his way into the room. Without thinking twice, he lunged forward and devoured the man completely. Afterward, he reflected that the target had a very predictable routine, which had made everything very easy. He thought the captain should thank him since he was helping reduce the crew's salary costs. He then realized he had made a huge mess on the floor and was struggling to find the ID card. While searching, he saw a picture of a woman in a bikini pinned to the wall and thought she was very pretty and attractive, but told himself that in his current state, he felt absolutely nothing. He finally found the ID card and ripped off the man's hand to ensure access to the systems, saying to himself that now he had everything he needed but first needed to clean up that mess. He started devouring the rest of the body, grumbling that the taste was just okay since the alcohol smell was so strong. When he finished, he used the card to open a reinforced security container. Inside, he discovered several freezers and realized the man was a smuggler. That was when he found the metamorph eggs and noticed that one of them was empty. He concluded that he himself had come out of that egg and that the man had tried to smuggle him. He reflected that, in the game, the starting location for a shapeshifter was not a spaceship but an ancient, forgotten ruin. He imagined that when that creature was born, it must have walked a bit before dying of starvation, at which point his own consciousness took over the body. That explained why he found cockroaches so tasty. It was pure survival instinct. For a moment, he observed a minute of silence for the creature that died to make way for him, but he soon remarked that he would now act like the shapeshifter he truly was. Next, he began devouring all the shapeshifter eggs that were there. After eating his fill, he noticed there was still plenty left inside the container and continued devouring everything. The internal system then issued an update stating that his physical enhancement was just 2 points away from advancing. In addition, he gained a new trait called Mimito. He thought he had been disappointed after devouring Kisaragi since he had only gained limited psychic perception. But on the other hand, the Chief of Supplies had given him a much more valuable gift. In the game, traits like these only appeared around the middle or end of the campaign and were extremely effective for killing enemies. With these new abilities, he could move much more aggressively. He knew there was not much time left before the meeting of the so-called space dogs, and that he needed to get as strong as possible before they arrived. In his cold and cruel thoughts, he remarked that the screams of the people on that ship would be heard by no one, and would be buried in the darkness of the abyss. The scene then shifted to the landing bay of the Megacorp research ship. A man called out to Scott, saying it was time for dinner. Scott replied that he would come soon, but wanted to finish what he was doing first. The man asked if he still had much left to do, and Scott answered that just enough to make a little extra. In another scene, while they were eating, Scott asked why they wanted them to inspect the jets. His friend replied that he was really going to keep talking about work even during dinner. Scott insisted that Fincher think about it, mentioning that he had heard rumors they were preparing to face Grand Metallicos. Fincher replied that if that were true, they were all doomed. Scott then explained that the Grinleys were already on board and asked if he had not noticed the strange smell in the air lately, which was typical of them. He said a friend had mentioned people had been disappearing since last week, but Fincher did not believe it. At that moment, another man appeared and said he had also heard those rumors and confirmed that the Chief of Supplies had disappeared. He also commented that the head of the cargo bay had been promoted to lead the team. Fincher asked if that was really serious, and Scott confirmed. Fincher questioned why, if people were disappearing, the higher-ups were not doing anything, and the other man replied it was to avoid causing panic. Fincher then asked what all the fuss about inspecting the jets was about, but the man admitted he did not really know. He had only heard about the disappearances. The scene returned to Scott, who was working again. Fincher asked if he wanted a late-night snack, but Scott said he did not need one and asked only for a synthetic drink if there was any available. After some time focused on his work, someone called him. Scott asked if it was Cameron, but the person said he was busy. Even so, the voice kept calling. Scott crawled out from under the jet to check, but did not find anyone in front of him. Confused, he asked why they had called him and vanished, but a dark voice began calling to him from the shadows. Scott walked into the dark area and noticed everything was turned off. He heard a voice saying it was looking for something. Unsuspecting, Scott went deeper into the room and soon smelled something very strong. He asked where the person was, but the voice replied that it was right in front of him. When he tried to move, he slipped on a bolt on the floor. At that moment, he realized something was very wrong, since it made no sense for Cameron to be in total darkness like that. He remembered the stories about people who had disappeared there, but it was too late. The Amorph was right behind him and grabbed him by the head, devouring him without hesitation, showing no mercy. Shortly after, Fincher appeared carrying a juice for Scott, but noticed he was no longer there. He heard Scott's voice saying he was in the repair compartments. When he entered the area, Fincher saw only a fallen flashlight on the ground. When something dripped onto the back of his neck, he reached up to check and realized it was blood. Looking up, he saw the Amorph holding Scott's head. Then, the Amorph devoured Fincher too, reflecting that he had a real talent for hunting and that his mimicry ability, the power to imitate human voices, was proving very useful. Inside the creatures transported in the smuggling container, there had been a larva of something called a red worm, a type of giant worm that lived only on desert planets and had the ability to imitate the voices of other creatures. Eating that larva had given the Amorph an essential hunting skill. Even so, the imitation was not yet perfect, as he could only reproduce the voice of the last creature he had consumed. Still, he considered this acquisition very valuable. He thought that the next day he would need to feed on someone from the kitchen and that he could imitate Cameron again. Amid these thoughts, he wondered if the slime was doing well. Calling him just Slime felt odd, so he decided from now on he would call him Number 26. He considered making a quick visit to his nest. At that moment, Number 26 communicated with him telepathically. The Amorph was surprised to realize that psychic perception could be used that way. He returned the slime's greeting and heard that he was very hungry that day. Amorph was startled to notice how much Number 26's vocabulary had grown. He felt guilty for not having managed to get him food that day and explained that the paths were too dangerous. After several people went missing, the head of security had increased surveillance in the lab, and the ducts above, which used to be clear, were now too risky. So he asked the slime to hold on a little longer. He thought that once Number 26 evolved into a pupa, he might be able to help him. The problem was that the conditions for evolution were strict. He would need to eliminate and consume 10 individuals from each of 2 intelligent species. But there were only humans on that ship, which made it impossible. There were also the pirates, but he did not know much about them. While thinking about it, Amorph noticed the head of risk management talking to someone. The chief said that, in any case, everything had gone well since Kisaragi had been eliminated and the ship would reach point C08 as planned. He commented that if it was Master Jungwoo Eugene's will, he would accept it with pride. Amorph thought that man was very cunning, like a fox, and seemed to have much bigger plans. Elsewhere, the captain asked the head of security how they were handling things. The chief explained that even with more cameras and guards, they could not solve the problem. The captain asked how many people had disappeared, and he answered that there were 8 in total, 7 after the death of the team leader. Amorph was amused by their desperation, laughing inwardly. The risk chief commented that by human standards, no one could hide for so long. Even though the metallic gremlins were considered just rumors, he believed some unknown entity was attacking the ship. Another man said that if it were an animal, they would have caught it already. But the risk chief countered that the freezers in the supply chief's container were all empty and questioned where all of that had gone. The captain then asked, if they really were being attacked, where would that creature be? The risk chief suggested there were still places they had not checked, such as the ventilation ducts. Amorph thought that man's name was Arnold and that he should have killed him faster. The men discussed that if Amorph had consumed the research leader's body, they would be in great danger and would probably have to fight the pirates. The captain then asked how many soldiers would be needed, and the risk chief replied that 6 or 8 squads would be required to handle the situation. The captain then gave permission for the plan to proceed. Amorph reflected that the confrontation was now inevitable and that even if he left the nest, there would be nowhere to run. The time had come to make a difficult choice between running or fighting. He remembered everything Arnold had said, felt a deep anger, and wondered if they considered him just an ordinary beast. He knew that was not true. He was a hostile alien that attacked the necks of enemies and a great shapeshifter. He decided he would fight and show them how foolish they were for wanting to face him in the narrow ducts of the ship. Activating his hypersense, Amorph began analyzing every inch of that environment. For him, it was as if the ship were a living organism and he was an infiltrated parasite. He detected that Captain Samuel and the other leaders were gathered on the command bridge, while armed soldiers moved into position. He concluded that the basic plan was already in place, but some details still needed adjustment. It was time to pay a visit to his guests. In the operations room of Sector B1, the soldiers were getting ready to enter the ducts. Arnold was thinking that the monster had probably killed Kisaragi too. They needed to eliminate all possible variables and could not allow any delays before Ms. Decester's, Sunhu's arrival. It was clear that the monster needed to die before the day ended. The soldiers split into small teams to explore the ducts. Arnold warned everyone that the path was very complex and required caution. At one point, he noticed that the camera in B3 was no longer transmitting properly and asked them to check it. He ordered B2 to rendezvous with B3, coordinating so the two groups would move together. Through the cameras, they could see the teams meeting up. That was when the screaming began. Arnold immediately asked what was happening. B2 replied frantically that the creature had appeared. Operations Support reported that they had lost contact with B2. The confusion increased because the images showed nothing clearly. Everything had happened too fast. They could not confirm anything concrete. Support asked why the head of risk management was just standing there, and Arnold wondered how that creature had managed to strike so quickly. A soldier in reinforced armor should not be taken down so easily. Not even a very skilled assassin could do something like that. He concluded they had underestimated the enemy, which clearly was not a wild animal. Arnold then ordered the communications leader to relay orders to everyone. If they saw anything moving, they were to open fire immediately. He told B3 to join up with B1 and to go looking for B2. Even so, Arnold thought that at the rate things were going, they would be picked off one by one. As B3 approached B1, the B1 team reported hearing a strange noise. The control room asked for more details, but they could not explain much, only saying it sounded like something was approaching. An operator quickly corrected them, saying the sound was actually coming from B3 since they could hear their voices, which brought relief to everyone in the control room. Suddenly, however, B1 began screaming that B3 had been attacked by the enemy. Arnold picked up the headset and identified himself as the leader, demanding more detailed explanations. But the soldiers could only say that everything happened so fast they did not understand what had happened. He was furious, asking if they were all idiots for not being able to see what was right in front of them. Full of rage, he threw the headset on the ground, frustrated by how impossible it all seemed. He wondered how this could happen without leaving traces on the cameras unless the monster was deliberately avoiding being filmed. Then he had an idea, picked up the headset again, and asked the B1 team to state their name and rank. At that moment, it was Amorph himself who replied, smiling with satisfaction at having fooled them all. The soldiers watched in horror as Amorph's claws appeared on the camera and destroyed the equipment. Everyone in the control room was in shock at what they saw. Right after, Arnold tried to reorganize the situation. Amorph, meanwhile, was satisfied. He had eliminated Team B and also managed to get information about number 26 from the intercepted conversations. He mentally explained to himself that, because of the signals he transmitted, B3's communication equipment became confused, making his ambush easier. He also remembered that one of the soldiers who stayed behind to fix the radio was incapacitated by his neurotoxin gland, making it much easier to fill his stomach. Now he thought about his next targets, Team A. He activated his hypersense again to locate them and found them advancing on high alert. Amorph realized they already knew he could imitate human voices, which required a change in strategy. Observing the path Team A had taken, he noticed a fork they had passed through recently. He smiled wickedly, thinking that knowledge was power and that knowing just a little more than the enemy could be a deadly poison. Meanwhile, Arnold warned everyone that the enemy could imitate human voices and that they should open fire immediately if they heard any cries for help. That was when Team A heard a human voice calling for help. Without hesitation, they opened fire in the direction of the sound. At that moment, they saw Amorph running by, smiling because he had tricked them and spread terror among the soldiers once again. One of the soldiers shouted for everyone to stop shooting when he realized the risk, but Amorph was already behind one of them and attacked without hesitation. The soldiers panicked when they saw him using a member of Team A3 as a human shield. Shooting would mean harming or killing their own comrade. Even so, Arnold ordered them to fire. They obeyed and opened fire, but Amorph managed to escape once more. Arnold made it clear to everyone that retreating was not allowed and that the enemy had to be captured at any cost. The soldiers approached A3's body to try to help him, realizing he was gravely wounded. They also saw that the monster seemed to have been hit by a few shots, but they had no idea what kind of creature they were facing. Next, they reached a very narrow duct and asked what they should do. One of them requested permission to inject the enhancement into themselves. The team leader authorized it. They then activated the enhancement, becoming much stronger and more confident, promising they would tear the monster apart now. Continuing through the passage, they noticed a large hole in the ventilation duct and concluded the creature must have gone down through there. At that moment, Amorph appeared behind them. He attacked one of the soldiers, grabbed his head forcefully, and slammed it against the ground, killing him. Another soldier reacted by shooting at Amorph, even though his own friend was in the line of fire, which resulted in his comrade's death. Then this soldier dropped his weapon and tried to punch Amorph, but Amorph managed to dodge quickly, which made the soldier furious. Amorph reflected that those soldiers were stronger than he had imagined. Even with the reinforcement, this was very different from what he had expected. It was not like in the game. He understood he would need to change his strategy again. Thinking of alternatives, he decided to do something he had not tried yet. He went back to the soldier he had wounded before and devoured him completely, saying to himself that this was more than enough. That way, the others would realize that A3 had been ambushed. After that, he destroyed the soldier's camera with a kick. In the control room, the alarm sounded, reporting that A3 had been attacked by the monster. Soon after, another soldier approached A3 to check if he was okay. When he tried to help his friend, Amorph struck him from behind and injected venom into his throat, paralyzing him completely. The man was left immobile, unable to react, watching in horror as Amorph devoured his comrade. Then Amorph turned to that soldier as well, saying it was now his turn, and brutally ripped off his head. Everyone in the control room was terrified, asking what kind of demon that thing was. Many there began to believe they were all going to die. Meanwhile, Amorph was thinking about how the enemy would react to all of this. He knew there were still about 90 soldiers and officers on the ship, and that now that he had revealed himself, they would attack with full force. He understood that the biggest problem on that ship was the weapons the humans had. He knew there were even plasma weapons on board, which represented a huge danger to him. Plasma weapons were extremely powerful, used in fleet battles, capable of destroying warships and tanks. Although they were large and hard to carry individually, there were lighter versions, but absurdly expensive. He suspected that at best they might have medium-weight plasma launchers. Looking at the ship's arsenal, he was still not sure if they actually had those weapons. He noticed that the soldiers were heading toward the agriculture section and thought that was perfect. It was his best chance. While the enemy searched in the wrong place, he would go after the leaders. He knew that by eliminating them, he would provoke massive chaos. More importantly, he needed to kill Arnold as quickly as possible. Elsewhere on the ship, the captain asked Arnold where that creature had come from. Arnold explained there was an unidentified life form listed by the supply manager. Amorph reflected that in space, enhancement equipment was essential, which was why people spent so much money on it. Arnold then told the other leaders that the enemy was a very intelligent life form capable of imitating human voices, and that in battle, obtaining information was the most important thing. Finally, he made a bold request: permission to use the squad's plasma launchers. The other leaders were shocked, saying he was crazy since they had agreed to use those weapons only against pirates. Amorph realized then that his doubts were cleared. They really did have those weapons. And while the leaders argued and disagreed, he understood that this was the perfect moment to strike and overwhelm them with his attack. His priority was Arnold, but he was still far from him. He decided his next target would be the man who had tormented number 26. Wasting no time, he approached the gathered leaders. His first victim was the researcher Wei, whom he attacked brutally, devouring his head completely and leaving everyone around traumatized by the horror they witnessed. Immediately after, Amorph moved on to kill the other leaders gathered in the command center. Amid the chaos, some called for the communications soldier to alert all troops about the attack. But before he could transmit any warning, Amorph killed him brutally with a bite. At that moment, Arnold fired at Amorph's back. Amorph thought with disdain that Arnold really believed he would run away after watching that massacre and wondered what he thought he was doing there without any enhancement equipment. He decided that if Arnold wanted to die, he would grant him that wish himself. But when Amorph lunged to attack him, he had a sudden vision of the future and saw Arnold drawing an extremely powerful weapon capable of killing him with a single shot. Fear gripped him when he realized it was an absurdly expensive plasma pistol, a lethal weapon if it hit his head. He understood that Arnold must have connections with some major house or powerful faction, like the Eugene. Arnold then spoke directly to Amorph, saying he had already figured out his plan. He drew the plasma pistol, leaving everyone around him terrified by the weapon. He said he did not know the creature's identity, but found it interesting how the monster's style reminded him of his master, the famous Si Hyun-ju. Without hesitation, Arnold began firing at Amorph's head. Amorph understood that the situation was extremely dangerous for him. Although he had survived tough situations before, he always found a way to win because he was a shapeshifter. He did not care about the so-called master Arnold mentioned because the one welcoming him now would be himself. He reflected that animals like bears, lions, and wolves were often portrayed in the media as fierce embodiments of violence, but in reality, predators were great cowards that avoided direct fights whenever they could. For him, that was the true instinct of a hunter. During the time he played as a shapeshifter, he had learned this lesson well. No matter how strong or smart someone was, strength was useless without caution. While dodging Arnold's plasma shots, Amorph noticed how unsteady the enemy's heartbeat was. He could smell the scent of a true predator emanating from him. Amorph quickly moved out of the line of fire and hid. The other leaders were shouting at Arnold to be careful since he was inside the command center. Even so, Arnold, with a calm and sarcastic tone, insisted he would be careful. Arnold then communicated with all the teams, warning them that the monster had invaded the command center and ordering all soldiers to get there as quickly as possible. Amorph realized he was just buying time to protect the captain and the other leaders. He knew he needed to finish everything before reinforcements arrived. He then picked up a fire extinguisher, thinking it would be very useful. He used it to fill the room with dense smoke, leaving everyone unable to see. The soldiers started complaining that they could not see anything, while Arnold furiously yelled, asking if their weapons were just for show. In the smoke, Amorph took advantage of his sharp senses. He managed to attack and devour one of the people there without being seen. One of the soldiers then asked where the captain was. Suddenly, a voice replied, saying the captain was not there and that he should go to him. It was a trap. Arnold tried to warn the men not to fall for those dirty tricks, but Amorph was already behind another target, killing him too. One blonde soldier became confused upon hearing two different voices giving orders and no longer knew whom to trust. One voice insisted he should shoot quickly, accusing the other of trying to deceive him. In the confusion, the blonde man ended up shooting Arnold in the arm instead of hitting Amorph, but Arnold quickly realized where Amorph was and fired in his direction, almost hitting his head. Amorph then activated his wings, flying to dodge the shots, and lunged straight at Arnold, finally managing to devour his head completely. Right after, he wasted no time and appeared in front of the blonde soldier who was still alive. To increase the terror, he showed up with Arnold's head clamped between his teeth. When the soldier thought he was about to be killed right then, Amorph simply turned around and left. As he moved away, he reflected that he would have liked the pleasure of tearing that man's flesh apart right there, but he did not have time for that. His nest was sending him clear signals to flee as quickly as possible. The captain watched the scene with irritation, asking why it was taking so long and ordering them to clean up the mess as quickly as possible. At that moment, the head of the medical team announced that the victims had already been identified. The captain asked if there were any survivors, and the doctor explained there were none except the research leader, 80 Wei. The captain looked confused and asked if he was dead, but the doctor explained that 80 Wei was alive, although hospitalized in the recovery room. He had been lucky to be immune to the monster's neurotoxins, but even so, he would suffer permanent damage to his vision, smell, and taste. Even though he survived, he would need to be intubated for the rest of his life. The doctor questioned why the captain had not simply surrendered to the pirates, but the captain refused even to consider the idea. Still, he saw the harsh reality. Many people had died, and there were few survivors left. They no longer had the means to face the pirates in battle. He began to wonder if he should just abandon everything and run. At that moment, a soldier appeared saying he had found an unusual weapon. When the captain took the equipment, he noticed it really was an excellent weapon and was 60% charged. He felt satisfied with that, but thought he could not trust anyone in that situation. He would have to take care of himself since there was a dangerous creature on the loose and the pirates were about to arrive. Meanwhile, Amorph was reflecting on what he had done, concluding that he had already eliminated almost all the important targets. Only Samuel remained, but he decided to ignore him for now. He felt it was time to expand his nest. He knew he could have up to 3 nests in different places and wanted to choose carefully where to place them. His priority was the cafeteria, since controlling the food supply was essential for human survival, and he could even contaminate the supplies. Next, he planned to establish another nest in the armory, where the plasma launcher was kept, a weapon dangerous enough to kill him quickly. There was also the laboratory, which stored large quantities of genetic samples. Although the chance of acquiring a new trait there was only 10%, using the selenium present in the location, he could rely on his pupa ability to better prepare against the pirates. He decided he would place nests in the cafeteria and the laboratory, as well as steal the plasma launcher. Even though he had not planned to use it, Arnold's words kept echoing in his mind. He did not know who this Eugene was or what he did, but he imagined he might arrive with the pirates or even infiltrate among them. For Amorph, nothing was more dangerous than an enemy with an unknown identity, so he needed to have cards up his sleeve. While thinking about this, number 26 appeared to talk to him. Amorph noticed he seemed happy and asked if they had not done experiments on him that day. Number 26 confirmed, saying yes, he was happy because he felt no pain. Taking advantage of the fact that everyone was hiding, Amorph decided it was a good time to act. He advanced down the corridor, passing a laser sensor. He waited 30 minutes without anyone showing up, which confirmed the path was clear. This way, he no longer needed to crawl stealthily. When he found number 26, he noticed he looked healthy but knew he would starve if left trapped there. Amorph thought that slimes ate anything and were immune to toxins, so taking number 26 to the nest would not be a problem. He invited the slime to leave, saying it was a place outside that laboratory. Number 26 eagerly accepted. Thus, Amorph finally rescued his companion, but asked him to wait a little while because he first needed to prepare the nest. Next, he began spreading his slime all over the laboratory, knowing humans could no longer use it after that. Satisfied with his work, he felt a strong hunger. Without hesitation, he devoured the brains stored there, along with all the animals and experiments. He even shared the food with number 26, who delighted in all of it. At that moment, Amorph noticed soldiers approaching with a researcher. As soon as they entered the laboratory, they were immediately shocked by the state of the place, completely covered in slime and destroyed. Without giving them a chance to react, a morph attacked the soldier first, killing him quickly. Then he turned on the researcher, who fell to his knees begging for mercy. When Amorph grabbed the man's head, number 26 said it hurt just to look at him. Amorph understood why, realizing that man had been involved in the experiments that had tortured number 26. Filled with rage, he offered the slime the chance to finish off the researcher. Without hesitation, number 26 enveloped the man's head and completely dissolved it, consuming everything while the researcher screamed in agony. After the man's death and feeding a bit more, Amorph saw the system appear before him, offering the chance to unlock the physical enhancement type. He considered it great luck since he had achieved this result earlier than expected. Without thinking too much, he accepted the evolution. His body underwent a painful and intense transformation, becoming more solid, robust, and much larger in size. Number 26 commented, impressed, that he was very big. Amorph replied that he had grown, comparing himself to a baby becoming an adult. Number 26, curious, asked what that meant, and Amorph explained simply that he was now like a big baby. The slime accepted this explanation, innocently starting to call him that. Amorph even admitted to himself that the nickname was not entirely wrong since he was still a kind of larva. He then felt how his body was more resistant and solid. His height had increased significantly, making him feel more confident for future battles. After getting used to the transformation, he checked his new traits. He had acquired natural recovery, piercing tentacles, and contamination organs. The natural recovery ability fused with his enhanced vitality, creating an advanced regeneration power, which was excellent for him. Despite this, he recognized there was a significant penalty. For a slime, unlocking new types was theoretically unlimited, but the requirements increased with each evolution. For example, if he first acquired psychic enhancement, the requirement for physical would go from 10 to 20. He knew that under normal conditions he could carefully plan how fast he evolved, but in the middle of that crisis he had no time for very complex strategies, so he decided to postpone the next unlock and focus on testing his new abilities. He evaluated the piercing tentacles and realized that although they were fragile alone, combined with physical enhancement they became lethal weapons. Next, he analyzed the contamination organ, seeing that it would be very useful since it could generate spores-secreting acid, making it possible to take control of the entire ship by contaminating every corner. This would be a huge advantage against enemies too difficult to defeat directly. Once he finished testing everything, he decided to head to his next destination, the cargo area. Number 26 asked where they were going, and Amorph explained the plan, thinking about how humans would react upon seeing him that size. The scene shifted to the corridor of the cargo area, where all the humans were running in panic, screaming about the monstrous thing approaching rapidly. Desperate, they tried to close the security door, but Amorph was faster, holding it before it could fully lock. He forced his way in and found many people hiding inside. Without hesitation, he advanced on them, killing everyone he found in the room. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a severely injured researcher was reflecting on his situation. He noticed he no longer heard the doctor's footsteps around him and wondered what was happening. He thought it would be better to just die than to go on living in that miserable state. That was when he heard footsteps approaching and, for a moment, thought it might be soldiers coming to help him. But he quickly realized it was Amorph. Amorph pressed a button to open the compartment where he was, exposing the defenseless researcher. Number 26 then took over and once again consumed the man's head, completely melting it. The researcher panicked, screaming that his head was burning and begging to be killed quickly. But the process was slow and painful, lasting about 3 hours. When it was over, Amorph asked number 26 if he was satisfied and what it was like to have his revenge. But number 26, not understanding the concept of revenge, just answered innocently that the food was very tasty to him. Amorph reflected on number 26, realizing he did not show complex emotions like revenge. He wondered if the slime was truly incapable of feeling something like that, or if he just had not learned it yet. This question made Amorph remember something curious. The researchers had shown a strange interest in that slime. He wondered if number 26 might one day evolve into something far more dangerous, like a sea demon. It was then explained that sea demons existed only on aquatic planets. They were over 25 meters long and had enormous tentacles covering their bodies. In the game itself, they were very reminiscent of slimes, so much so that many players suspected there was a link between the two species. The company responsible for the game had said it was just a design error, but who could guarantee there was not something real behind it? While thinking about this, Amorph evaluated the progress of his nest expansion, satisfied to see it was going as planned. Now he needed to decide what his next target would be. The scene then shifted to the territory of the Vera Space Dog Cartel located in CO8. From space, it was already possible to hear cries for help coming from a ship. Inside it, two men were holding a woman who was begging for help, desperately calling for her husband. The husband, in a panic, begged them to release her but ended up getting shot in the back, falling dead to the floor. The criminals looted everything they could find in the ship, and between cruel laughter they said they could do whatever they wanted with the women, but all the men had to be killed. They said this was the motto of the Vara cartel. Watching all that brutality was a different figure. A humanoid cybernetic lion, imposing, who silently observed with a cold stare. He was the leader of the cartel. One of the gang members quietly questioned how the boss could have done this to them, since they had only been hired as mercenaries. But the boss dismissed any doubt, calling them idiots and saying they were being naive. Another pirate reminded everyone that the protective force must have received the distress signal and that when they arrived they would all be executed. The boss, however, showed no fear. On the contrary, he mocked the situation with a psychopathic smile on his face. He explained that under megacorp law, mercenaries who broke contracts committed crimes, but if there were no witnesses, the crime simply did not exist. For him, calling the protective force was a complete waste of time since no one would be left alive to tell the story. The boss calmly got up and took a knife, declaring with cruel pleasure that his hobby was skinning Megacorp's pigs. Without hesitation, he killed the ship's captain, who was already subdued. After that, he authorized his men to take whatever they wanted. While they organized the loot, the boss wondered aloud if they still had any other jobs that day. He decided it was not worth worrying about and ordered them to bring a prisoner named Yahello. When Yahello was brought to him, the boss demanded explanations, reminding her that she had said she had a job to do that day. The woman, frightened, said she needed to communicate with someone through a remote connection, but the contact had been suddenly cut off. The boss became furious and demanded more details. Yahello explained that the ones who had requested the contact were Captain Samuel and the research team. They wanted to acquire a specific body. Surprised, the boss asked if she knew whose body it was. She replied that it belonged to a woman from the Eugen family, a very important noble family. In their last contact, they had offered 1,000,000 credits for the body. The boss became thoughtful upon hearing this. He thought it was insane to pay so much for a corpse, but he sensed the smell of conspiracy in the air. He knew Megacorp was changing its stance, and there were rumors that the old Terex clan, to which the Eugen family belonged, was being threatened by the new Eden clan from Mars. The Eden clan was known for its advanced starship development, but behind the scenes also worked with genetic modifications. A body from the Eugen family could contain valuable modifications worth tens of millions on the black market. The boss saw this as an opportunity for profit and also as a chance for revenge against the Eden clan, which had destroyed part of his life in the past. Despite all these thoughts, he admitted to himself that in the end, money was money. He asked Yahello if the problem with the contact could have been some interference, but she replied she was not sure. The boss then smiled menacingly, saying that Megacorp was operating in his territory without even asking for permission. Although he did not yet know exactly who the enemy was, he admitted they were very bold. Decided, he ordered his crew to immediately start tracking all communications. Without hesitation, he ordered them to blow up the ship they were in to eliminate evidence, and departed with his fleet toward the ship where Samuel was. At that moment, the alien, one of the sentinels, noticed the pirates approaching, knowing that confrontation would be inevitable. He quickly reconnected to that research ship and confirmed that the invaders were drilling through the hull to force a docking. The graffiti on the side of the ship was proof that it was really them. At that moment, the pirates boarded Samuel's ship, and Amorph noticed the group was organized as one would expect from a band of specialists. However, he wondered if they were truly intelligent or just stupid, since anyone would have realized there was something very wrong with that ship. When the pirates advanced, they were startled by what they found. They reported to the boss that there was something very strange on the bridge. There was no one aboard, and plants were growing everywhere, spreading in a bizarre way. The boss, irritated, could not understand how plants could exist in space and thought the men were mocking him. He called them all idiots and decided to check personally, threatening to rip their heads off if necessary. When the boss entered the ship, Amorph analyzed him immediately and noticed he had 2 fortified hearts and machinery integrated into his body. It was clear that this mutant was the leader. He then observed the other members of the group, identifying an insectoid capable of secreting pheromones, as well as a cyborg from the Stellar Union whose mechanical sounds replaced heartbeats. He realized the cartel was very diverse and worried about the variety of creatures he had been consuming to evolve. When he noticed a woman in the group, he felt there was something very suspicious about her. She seemed extremely extremely normal to be there, as if she had a computer in her head but acted completely human. He considered her very suspicious and decided to keep an eye on her. Meanwhile, a morph was talking to number 26, asking where the baby was going. He answered himself that he needed to leave, but that it would be dangerous, so he ordered number 26 to stay there. He also asked him to take care of his plasma weapon, stressing that it was very important. Next, he explained his plan to destroy the enemy ship's power generator, forcing the pirates to split their forces between protecting the research ship and the mothership. With that, they would form defense and attack groups, beginning the hunt the moment they separated. Soon after, Amorph invaded the pirates' ship. He found it curious that there was no real security there, something to be expected from pirates who never imagined being robbed. He advanced through the corridors until he found the nuclear reactor, noticing that everything seemed normal except for the security androids patrolling the area. He knew that if he attacked them directly, they would alert the artificial intelligence system, so he needed to prepare first. For that, he looked for something to eat. He walked through the ship until he found two pirates walking. He killed the human quickly, cutting off his head, and when the insectoid tried to warn someone, he grabbed the enemy's arm and ripped it off brutally. Then he killed the insectoid violently and devoured both bodies, only to find that those NPCs did not contribute much to his evolutionary conditions. Soon after, he heard the radio asking what had happened to the patrol team. Amorph, imitating the dead human's voice, replied that nothing had happened. He kept walking and opened a door, believing he would not have to fight the androids. When he entered, he used acid on the floor to make a path and saw the nuclear reactor. He commented to himself that a human would have noticed the trick, but the androids did not see anything. Then he attacked with venom, managing to shut down the reactor. Meanwhile, the pirates were watching the security cameras and recordings. They were horrified to see that the ship had been taken over by a cruel monster that had killed everyone in a brutal manner. The boss, extremely frightened, could not understand what was happening. He watched the strange plants growing everywhere, noticed the absence of life signs, and saw the ship turning into a kind of ghost ship. He knew he needed to find out more about that attacker, so he ordered them to replay all the footage. As he watched, he began to realize the research ship's crew had been massacred and the facility's management was completely shattered. In one of the recordings, he saw a strange creature attacking from above and concluded it was not only strong, but also extremely intelligent and dangerous. He was concerned about the Eugen family, but understood that before thinking about them, he needed to ensure the safe recovery of the body. He then called the woman the group jokingly nicknamed Garlic by her real name Manul, asking if she had lost contact with them the previous day. She confirmed, explaining that the initial plan was to meet them the day before, but the ship never showed up, so they had spent the entire day searching. The boss realized he now knew almost all the details about the research ship, but still had no idea what exactly that creature was. Even so, he was confident they had managed to infiltrate quietly, believing the monster did not know they were there. In the end, he ordered his men to locate and kill that creature before looking for the body they had come to recover. While everything was happening, one of the pirates informed the boss that there was a problem. The ship's engine was broken. The boss, irritated, did not understand how that could have happened if the engine had been working perfectly. The pirate explained that the engine had been completely melted, which made the boss even angrier that someone had dared to mess with his ship. He then turned to Manul, asking if she could pilot that ship. Despite getting scolded by him for hesitating, she ended up confirming that she could. The boss ordered 3 men to help her with the piloting task and told the rest of the group to follow him because he intended to hunt down and kill that damned creature that was ruining his plans. Amorph, hidden, watched everything closely. He found it amusing to see the boss so angry and felt confident because he knew the pirates had no idea there were still survivors hiding in the research ship, around 20 people, including the captain and the senior manager. He had not spared those men out of mercy, but because he planned to use the rivalry between Megacorp and the pirates to his advantage. He was sure that while they fought each other, he could take advantage of it. He noticed that in the control room there were only 3 pirates and Manul, the woman who pretended to be normal. He saw this as a perfect chance to attack, but even so, he felt a bad premonition. His shapeshifter instinct warned him that she was very dangerous. He began to wonder if she could be Arnold's master and what had made Arnold say those strange things about her. She seemed to be just a genetically modified human, but considering she was a noble from Megacorp's capital, it was very likely she had been altered beyond the usual limits of Kisaragi Eugene. He thought that if she had been modified to the point of becoming something like a hack player, it could be very difficult to defeat her in his current juvenile form. Even so, he admitted to himself that seeing a strong opponent made him feel both fear and excitement. However, he decided that for now, he would deal with the pirates first. The scene then focused on the pirates. One of them reported that the biological detector had identified identified human signs in the captain's cabin, but the path was blocked. He suggested they might use a drill to open a hole nearby. The boss, very irritated, replied rudely, asking if the man also asked permission to urinate. Without further discussion, he ordered them to open the hole immediately. As soon as they managed to breach the ship, they were surprised by a shot that hit one of the pirates right in the face. The people hiding on the ship began attacking the invaders desperately. The boss, consumed by rage, reacted with brutal violence and killed everyone very quickly, but decided to leave only one man alive to interrogate him. The survivor, trembling with fear, begged for his life and explained that he was the leader of the medical team on that ship, saying he could be useful to them. The boss then asked where the ship's captain was. The doctor replied that the captain had escaped in an escape pod. The boss was incredulous to hear that he had abandoned his own crew, but the doctor insisted that was all he knew and that he was not even sure if the captain had actually escaped. The boss analyzed the situation, realizing the ship was completely destroyed because of the monster, and that the only human who knew where the target body was had fled. Then he had an idea. He asked the doctor if he at least knew where the body they wanted was. The doctor explained that Kisaragi's body had been taken by the monster. The boss, furious, demanded to know why the monster would want that body, and the doctor answered directly that it was because the monster ate humans. Faced with this information, the boss understood there was no time to waste. He ordered all the pirates to move in groups of 6 and to report immediately if they found the monster, as it had become the top priority. Looking at the doctor, the boss told him that he claimed to want to become a pirate and that, coincidentally, they needed a doctor at the moment. He asked if he knew anything about genetic remodeling. The doctor, realizing this could save his life, confirmed that he did. While all this was happening, the Amorph kept watching in silence, reflecting that everything had ended much faster than he expected. He recognized that he should have predicted it. After all, their boss was a huge mutant, almost like the Hulk. He also noticed that the pirates were moving in groups of 6, except for the boss, who stayed with only one of his men. He knew he also needed to start moving. At that moment, number 26 approached saying he wanted to go with the baby because he wanted to help with the mission. Amorph found it almost funny, like a child not wanting to leave his father. At the same time, he thought that number 26 needed to gain combat experience, even if he would not be of much help for now. He also could not allow him to get in the way, so Amorph picked up number 26 and put him on his shoulder, telling him to pay close attention to the enemies. With a plan in mind, he decided he would start by attacking the armory. Meanwhile, the pirates continued advancing through the ship, and one of the insectoids wondered aloud if that ship had turned into a jungle, and what kind of creature could have the ability to grow plants larger than the doors themselves. When the pirates started cutting through those thick plants blocking the way, a green liquid ended up splashing on them. They looked at each other, confused and disgusted, trying to understand what that foul substance was. Suddenly, they realized that the blade that had cut the vines was beginning to melt, as was the face of one of the pirates hit by the liquid. At that moment, Amorph appeared by surprise and killed one of the men before they could react. The pirates were terrified to see that monster, which was very different from anything they had ever faced. Even trying to shoot him did nothing, as Amorph moved too fast and killed them all in the blink of an eye. Number 26, taking advantage of the chaos, ended up possessing the head of the insectoid pirate who was left. However, one of the soldiers still alive managed to grab the radio and try to warn the others that the monster was there. Before he could finish, Amorph killed him too. Right after, he mimicked the dead man's voice to answer the radio, saying there was nothing happening, just to mislead them. He thought it would be better to keep the radio with him since he could use it to create distractions in the future. While examining the half-body of the man he had just killed, he noticed that he was still breathing. He suspected it was because he was a cyborg from the Stellar Union. He reflected on the contrast between Megacorp, which preferred to modify human genes, and the Stellar Union, which believed the path to evolution was to replace the weak human body with mechanical parts. He thought the problem with the Stellar Union was forcing those ideals onto other species, turning any hostage into a machine without caring about their will. He concluded that both Megacorp and the Stellar Union were equally insane in their methods. After devouring that cyborg, he mentally commented that it had a very interesting taste, even with the metallic and oily flavor from the mechanical parts. At that moment, the system appeared before him again to display the evolution requirements. It announced that part of the condition to evolve from hatchling to juvenile was complete. Intelligence was 10 out of 10, but the second intelligence was only at 1 out of 10. Amorph was surprised by that and remembered there were 12 cyborg pirates on that ship. He concluded that if he could devour all of them, he might advance to the next stage of evolution. Number 26, curious, asked why he was so excited. Amorph answered vaguely that it was something he did not need to know. In his thoughts, he compared the cyborg pirates to space dogs that some called space disasters, but to him they were just like Santa Claus bringing Christmas presents. Meanwhile, Amorph kept killing and devouring enemies throughout the ship, advancing with brutality and speed. He noticed he had already eliminated 2 entire teams, but regretted losing 3 cyborgs in the process because their bodies had been corroded by the very acid he used. Only parts like legs remained, and he wondered whether or not he should eat them. When he tried to eat a leftover leg, he ended up spitting it out, realizing he was not gaining the predation effect. He thought there was a small chance of that happening when he was not the one who killed the target. Because of that, he decided to kill directly the pirate that number 26 was devouring, even feeling bad for doing that to him, but recognizing he had no choice if he wanted to evolve. At that moment, the radio on one of the body's arms started crackling, demanding immediate responses. Voices were reporting that there was a big mess to sort out in the cargo bay, while others complained that the restaurant was chaos. Amorph then used the radio to answer, saying the laboratory was clear. However, the man on the other end was suspicious and said he was not the one in charge of the radio. Amorph quickly made up an excuse, saying he had been getting ready to loot everything, and that was why he had not had the radio before. He thought to himself that even though they were pirates, they were very paranoid. He also reflected that, despite the pirate boss being a very powerful mutant, he needed to keep an eye on him. He found it funny to be walking around with a slime on his back, thinking the gaming community would go crazy if they knew about it, since he himself was known for acting alone. He admitted he did not have many friends and recognized that things in this game were becoming increasingly different. That made him nervous but also excited. Meanwhile, the pirate boss was also growing suspicious. As a former soldier, he was very strict and could recognize signs of trouble. He felt there was something very wrong with the communications coming from the laboratory. His animal instinct warned him that it could all be a trap, so he ordered his men to go to the laboratory immediately to check what was happening. He then turned to the doctor and asked where the escape ship was. The doctor asked him to follow. As they walked, the boss thought that no one could ever touch his battleship without paying dearly for it. He was already planning to find an escape route and plant bombs in the engine room to make sure nothing got away unpunished. The pirate boss analyzed his plan coldly. He knew there was a nuclear fusion engine on the ship and that a small bomb would be enough to destroy everything. He thought that after escaping and detonating the place, that monster would have no way to survive. He recognized that his own men left behind would die too, but he did not care much about that since there were always creatures willing to join the pirates. The only people he planned to take with him were the doctor and Manhwa. He then asked the doctor if there was any known weakness of the monster, but the doctor admitted there was none. The boss concluded that he was a coward and was afraid. But was that really all he had to say? He noticed that the doctor seemed more afraid of the monster than of him. Determined to extract more information, the boss asked what the creature's characteristics were. The doctor explained that it moved like a ghost, devoured humans in the blink of an eye without leaving anything behind, and that they only noticed its presence much later. The boss mocked their incompetence, saying that only happened because they were idiots. Even so, the doctor insisted that the ship had many security systems, but the monster still avoided them all and killed every target. The boss thought it was ridiculous, but deep down understood he was telling the truth. He decided he needed to gather all the men to have a better chance of success. He grabbed the radio and announced that plans had changed, ordering everyone to reorganize before advancing to the laboratory. Listening to this, Amorph thought that the boss was actually smart since he had not fallen for his imitation, something that fooled even trained humans. Maybe it was pure animal instinct, but he recognized that it was already too late since even while complaining, the pirates were obeying orders and moving to the designated location. Amorph then decided he needed a new attack plan. He used his tentacles to connect to the nest he had created on the ship, activating his nest management ability, which turned the entire structure into a living organ of his own. Basically, now the pirates were trapped inside his stomach. He spread parasitic spores throughout the environment, making the pirates start to suffocate. Some still tried to run, but collapsed before they could escape. Amorph analyzed the result and thought that when he evolved to the juvenile stage, he could use that ability much more effectively. He admitted that this time he had only used it out of curiosity to understand how it worked, but realized it left him extremely exhausted. He turned to number 26 and said he was hungry, telling him he needed to eat a little. He then began devouring the bodies of the pirates. He commented to himself that it was normal for pirates to abandon their companions. He noticed that 5 of the 7 he killed were cyborgs and checked the system to see how much was left to complete his evolution. He saw there were only 2 cyborgs left to reach the next stage. He also realized that 5 pirates had fled to the training room. He thought about why they would choose that location and concluded it was probably because they believed they would have a better vantage point there since it was a more spacious environment. However, he remembered that the previous crew had thought the same thing, turning that place into a real slaughterhouse in the past. As he approached, he could sense through the doors the pheromones and breathing of the people hiding inside, realizing the absolute terror they felt toward him. He warned number 26 that it would be very dangerous and asked him to hide behind him. Then he opened the door, thinking that more than 20 people had already died there and killing 5 more would not be any problem. The pirates, terrified, still tried to shoot him, but nothing worked. One of them drew a saber and declared himself the second in command of the Drava cartel. Amorph recognized the weapon as a sonic blade, capable of damaging his shell, but judged it was useless if the man did not know how to use it properly. He considered that typical of pirates, acting rashly. Without hesitation, he attacked the man and managed to open a hole in the middle of his chest. He was surprised to notice that he was the first prey to show any persistence since he killed Arnold. He then decided to finish him quickly to spare him further pain and agony. After finishing him off, he commented to himself that there were 4 enemies left, imagining they were hiding inside the locker room. At that moment, the system notified him that he had gained an ability called Human Nature. He was intrigued by the name, thinking it was very vague. He reflected on the genetic traits of that universe, knowing there were hundreds of survival traits in space. Not all were advantageous. For example, the Hulk's Berserker mode gave twice the physical strength, but made the user lose all self-control. He understood that some abilities had greater disadvantages than benefits. Traits with ambiguous names were usually the most dangerous. He thought about the Stellar Union, which kidnapped people to turn them into robots, and about Megacorp, which created monsters by remodeling human genes. He knew that civilizations like these dominated humanity in that universe. He concluded that it was unlikely there would be any trait that granted human qualities without some terrible cost. Finally, he wondered if that ability would give him human emotions. He considered that this could be a serious disadvantage for him as a shapeshifter since he fed on people. He judged the risk to be very high and decided to reject that ability. At that moment, Amorph's instinct urged him to reconsider the ability. He wondered if it was really that important. His instinct signaled a very dangerous choice, but he thought for a moment and decided to trust it, accepting the risk. When he confirmed the choice, his system glowed, but nothing happened immediately. He then realized that the human trait was classified as a mental characteristic. He still needed 3 more to achieve the superconsciousness upgrade. That human trait would help him, in moments of decision, choose the right path, which could be very valuable to him in the future. While he was thinking about this, number 26 commented that he had been standing still for a long time, which was strange. Amorph replied that he did not need to worry and explained that he could smell different pirates in the training room area. He had no intention of letting any of them escape. The mood in the room grew tense when one of the pirates, hiding, watched his friends being killed. He wondered if he would be next. Unlike the others, he was just an ordinary man. Desperate, he mentally begged Boss Chewbacca to protect him. But Amorph used his tail to pierce him, devouring him right after. Then he commented to himself that 11 cyborgs had already been eliminated, leaving only 1 more. The problem was that this last one was in the control room, along with the person he was trying to avoid, a human with modified genes, whom he suspected was from the Eugene family. He concluded that before reaching her, he needed to deal with the ship's leader. At that moment, Amorph was attacked but managed to dodge quickly. It was the boss, accusing him of having killed all his men, including the second in command. Number 26 jumped onto the wall and camouflaged himself, while Amorph realized how much more intimidating the boss was than he had imagined. The man was over 3 meters tall, and for many, Amorph would not stand a chance against him, being only an enhanced mutant. Even so, he wanted to see if the boss was really that powerful. Meanwhile, the pirates were watching the fight on television, debating whether they should do something. But they remembered that the boss had ordered them to help Manhwa, so they stayed in place. One of them asked Manhwa how much longer it would take, and she replied that it was almost ready. She explained that the system was outdated but was still the artificial intelligence of a megacorp battleship, an advanced core of space engineering and computer science. This made the work complicated. The pirates, not understanding anything she was saying, just asked her to hurry so they could help the boss. But Manhwa was reflecting to herself that Arnold had done well to warn them. She knew the monster had hidden in the smoke, but he would not be able to fool her or escape her remote vision. She also remembered that he had emptied the laboratory and stolen genetic samples, which showed intelligence. She concluded that he knew how to use the abilities he acquired and wondered if he might be able to evolve or absorb genes, becoming someone like her. If that were true, Elchen would not be able to defeat him, because he was just a monster empowered by the will of others. He did not even know the reason for his own creation. She felt tired of him but considered that good news. She thought that the pirates were no longer useful, and that she needed to reduce the number of genes available for the monster to absorb. She had many names. Megacorp's enemies called her Helix Witch, her family called her Shadow, and treated her with admiration. The family leader, Akira Yujin, called her White Code. The one who was once her father called her Si Hyun. She was the pinnacle of the Yujin family's genetic engineering and the sole heir of a forgotten lineage. The scene then returned to the fight between the boss and Amorph. The battle was balanced. The boss managed to hit Amorph's tail, electrocuting him. Amorph felt sharp pain in all his organs and wondered if the boss thought he was a combat android. While that was wrong, it was not a bad choice of weapon. The boss said that Amorph was not a weapon created by the Stellar Union and suspected that he understood his words. He then revealed that he had a button on his neck. Amorph wondered if it was a button to activate Berserk mode, but the boss explained that he had installed a bomb in the ship's nuclear reactor and that the detonator was synchronized with his own heart. If Amorph killed him there, the entire ship would explode. Amorph then realized from the doctor's reaction that he was telling the truth, but he concluded that, deep down, it did not matter much because the boss would not detonate the bomb easily. He valued his own life too much. He was intelligent, had an extraordinary body, and enormous arrogance. There was nothing about him that diminished his will to live. However, at that moment, the boss pressed the button on his neck, causing every cell in his body to change. His appearance transformed into something grotesque and terrifying, revealing that he had more than simple genetic transplants. From his new form, Amorph recognized the genes of a mountain wanderer, also known as stone dragons, because of the hardness of their shells. The boss tried to attack him, but Amorph dodged quickly and tried to use his tail to pierce him. However, before completing the attack, he remembered the bomb and hesitated. It was at that moment that the boss landed a violent blow to his head. The attack did not kill him thanks to his stone head, but he kept thinking he could have died if not for that. He wondered if the boss's plan had been precisely to provoke this confrontation, to trigger the bomb from the start. The boss claimed that Amorph's attacks were useless. Amorph reflected that unless he targeted his heart, there would be no vulnerable points. The shells around the arms and legs were so tough that nothing short of a plasma weapon could pierce them. He concluded he would only win if he found a weak spot, but it seemed the boss already knew that. Even so, Amorph thought that his tail was not his only dangerous weapon. While the boss attacked non-stop, Amorph assessed his options. He knew he could release venom through his teeth and claws, and that he would only win if he could break through the enemy's tough shell. He wondered how he would crack such reliable protection. Then he thought of the sonic blade as an alternative. Moreover, he knew that those mutants had an inevitable weakness. He just had to wait for the right moment for it to reveal itself. He remembered that the warehouse where they were was the place where he had awakened for the first time in that world, a perfect location to buy time. The boss kept attacking with monstrous strength. Amorph knew that Hulk-type mutants were incredibly strong and fast but consumed energy quickly. That was why, between strikes, they needed a pause to catch their breath. If the boss got tired, he would be forced to stop. He decided to wait for that moment, but he remembered that the boss had two hearts. The problem was to find out which one was connected to the detonator. He knew that the main heart of the Hulk mutants was usually on the left side, so it was likely that the detonator was linked to it. However, the boss was too smart to make that obvious, and Amorph could not detect the mechanism. While planning, the boss spotted him and threw a violent punch in his direction. Amorph managed to escape again, but noticed that the boss was starting to get irritated by his attempts to flee. He deduced that, with the modifications, the enemy had reduced his own weakness, since normally he would already be tired and stopped. He noticed, however, that his speed was slower. Amorph decided it was time to act. He jumped in front of the boss, and at the moment he tried to hit his head, Amorph used the opening to react. He drew his saber and stabbed it into the boss's arm, opening a crack in the armor. Then he bit hard, making the boss scream in pain. Furious, the boss threw Amorph away, shouting in rage. But at that moment, the boss's body began to paralyze, and he fell to the ground. Amorph understood that the poison was not so effective on normal humans, but by now it must be spreading through the enemy's body. He then started tearing the boss's body apart, discovering that the detonator was on the right side. He realized that the timer was activated when the boss received a very strong blow and that the second heart limited the side effects of the genetic manipulation. The boss's plan was to die, taking Amorph with him. After dismantling the detonator, Amorph thought about taking advantage of the Hulk mutant's genetic samples. At that moment, number 26 appeared. Amorph told him to hide, but 26 said there were problems. Amorph then had a sudden vision of the future, seeing 26 die and himself also being killed. In panic, he grabbed 26 and ran away. That was when Si-hyun attacked them. She was impressed that he had managed to escape and showed curiosity about where he had gotten what he was carrying. Amorph realized he had planned to deal with her last, but he didn't expect her to chase him all the way there. He noticed a shining spear forming in her hand, a sign that her genes were mixed with those of high-level organisms. He saw dozens of visible genetic traits on her and understood he would never be able to defeat her in that state. His whole body seemed to warn him not to face that creature. He knew he needed to retreat and reorganize quickly. But at that moment, Si-hyun pierced the boss's heart with her weapon, probably activating the bomb's timer. Amorph became desperate, thinking about what he could do now, since he couldn't attack her without dying as well. He concluded that he needed to observe the enemy to gather more information. He noticed her eyes, which seemed like those of an observer from outside space or perhaps a demolisher. Si-hyun then made him an offer. Noticing that he was similar to her, she promised to spare his life. In return, she wanted him to serve her, as if he were her pet. After all, both were creatures that depended on genes, and she said she could be a perfect master for him. Si-hyun then invited Amorph to join her. He was surprised to realize that the powerful Si-hyun was demanding that he become her slave. Using his hypersense, he realized she was not lying. He observed the claw-shaped blade on her wrist, recognizing it as a Galargon claw, something capable of piercing even his protective shell. Besides that, she had several other lethal weapons. He understood that, rationally, submitting to her would be the sensible choice. Amorph then bowed at her feet and Si-hyun smiled, saying he had made the right choice. But number 26 tried to encourage him, telling him not to be afraid because he was there with him. At that moment, Amorph remembered why he always liked playing with his character. He didn't understand why he was obsessed with a character considered useless, or why online communities called him more Pop Park. The answer was simple. He loved the freedom to choose, to grow with each decision, becoming stronger without limits. That was why he loved being an Amorph, and for him, there was only one real choice. When Si-hyun tried to pet his head as if he were a good boy, he reacted by attacking her face with acid and, taking advantage of her surprise, fled to hide. Si-hyun, furious, shouted that if he wanted to play that way, she would accept the game and started throwing flames at him. Amorph thought she was much stronger than him, perhaps the most powerful enemy he had ever faced since becoming Amorph. However, he had already defeated extraordinary enemies before and had always managed to come out victorious. He promised himself that he would teach her a lesson, remembering that a fight was not just brute strength. Meanwhile, the ship's boss managed to get up, furious at Si-hyun for having lured him into that state. He promised that he would make her beg for her life, but soon noticed that his device was destroyed. He understood that everything would be lost if he did not reach the engine room within 10 minutes. Still, he told himself he would not die there because he was different from all the others. He was Ellen Drava. Meanwhile, Amorph ran alongside number 26, who asked if his legs were hurting. Amorph replied that it wasn't just his legs but his whole body that ached. He observed that Si-hyun's eyes had X-ray capacity, which made any surprise attack useless. If he tried to hide, she would find him quickly. Besides that, she had other sensory abilities, which made the situation even more complicated. He thought he was running out of time and that Si-hyun probably already knew he was looking for the bomb. He imagined she expected him to try to escape using an escape pod, and would therefore block the entrances to trap him. He recognized it was the same strategy he himself had used against the pirates before, as if fighting another experienced player. For now, he decided he needed to focus on eliminating the enemy before worrying about the bomb. He knew that facing her would also give him more information. The problem was that his abilities were inferior to hers. Thinking quickly, he remembered something special in the lab, something that could turn the game in his favor. This item was called Ion, a resource capable of allowing him to use the abilities of a youthful body for a limited time. He knew the technique Si-hyun used was called Sword Dance, a Galargon skill that combined brutal physical strength. At that moment, he had zero tolerance to physical attacks, but if he evolved, he could withstand them. He also wanted to launch attacks from a distance, but that consumed a lot of energy. Despite this, he knew he no longer had time to worry about reserves. He asked number 26 to wait a moment, explaining that he needed to get something urgent. Then he began searching desperately until he finally found the object. In the game, that only appeared as a notification, but now he needed to figure out how it worked in real life. At that moment, number 26 tried to stop him, telling him not to do it. Amorph was confused, wondering why 26 was acting that way, but he had no time to think further. He ignored the warning and took the ion without waiting. Soon his body began to transform, bringing intense pain. After enduring that terrible pain, he realized his appearance had changed drastically. Now he had an absurdly imposing design. He noticed some differences. His reinforced skeleton had become a monstrous skeleton. His head now sported magnificent horns that he could use to pierce enemies. On his left hand, a new organ that launched bony spikes had appeared. His strength was comparable to plasma pistols, and he could apply these traits in his attacks. His shell was protected by a shield resistant to physical attacks, which would allow him to withstand Galargan's claws. However, he knew he needed to check the time limit. In the game, that lasted only 5 minutes, and he assumed in reality it was the same. He located Saihyun with his sensors, realizing she was even more dangerous than he had imagined. He knew he needed to drain her as much as possible before starting the decisive fight. He quickly connected to the ship, telling himself that 5 minutes was not much time. He had to resolve everything as fast as possible. Meanwhile, Si-hyun was walking through the ship, being hit by spores that released an acidic liquid. Even so, she smiled and protected herself using her fire. Amorph noticed she was approaching and warned number 26 to hold on, as he intended to lure her to the place where the nuclear reactor was. He knew that in that spot she could not fight at full strength, since even the slightest blow could cause a devastating explosion, impossible to survive even for someone with many special genes. When Amorph was almost reaching the reactor, Si-hyun was already in front of him. To protect him, Amorph threw number 26 away and was immediately attacked by flames again. However, this time he managed to see her movements clearly, something he normally could not, and he moved forward to attack her. Despite that, Si-hyun used her claw to hit his face, acknowledging that he was faster than before but saying that still would not be enough to defeat her. Amorph managed to hold her with his tail and launch some spikes in her direction, but Si-hyun successfully blocked the attack. She admitted the blow was not bad, as it made her worry a little. At that moment, her hair changed color to a bright red tone, which scared Amorph, who did not expect that transformation. In an extremely fast move, Si-hyun cut his tail before he even noticed. She commented that he really knew about the red mist, considering him a very interesting opponent. It was explained that the red mist was a predator of forest planets that exuded a threatening pheromone, causing hallucinations in its prey. Amorph understood that if she really had that ability, he would need to defeat her quickly before the effect of the psionium ended. He tried to stay calm and waited for an opportunity. When he moved to attack her, he managed to bite her arm just as she tried to defend herself. Annoyed, Si-hyun reacted, saying he was boring her. Amorph launched spikes again, which were blocked once more. However, at that moment, her hair returned to its normal tone. Amorph realized he had discovered something important. Although Si-hyun had powerful abilities enough to face advanced players, she had a critical weakness. She could not use two abilities at the same time. He understood he needed to find out how long she took to switch powers, and that no matter how fast she was, there would always be a gap to attack. Determined to change his strategy, Amorph advanced once more with the goal of cornering her. The narrative then shifted to number 26, who remembered the world where she opened her eyes for the first time. It was a cold and heavy environment called by intelligent beings the seabed. It was her home, a place of low temperatures and high pressure. Even so, number 26 did not think that place was bad, because there were others of her kind living together and protecting her, although they were weak and always lived in fear. When she discovered her special powers, she began using them to protect her species from predators. Over time, she became the leader of that group, but her life did not change much. They shared food and slept together in tight groups, and for her that was the greatest happiness that could exist. However, that happiness did not last long. One day, she heard the desperate screams of the others and wished with all her strength to save them. She believed she had managed to protect them, but unfortunately miracles do not happen so easily. After years, the leader who had failed in her duty woke up in a liquid and foul prison. There, she was forced to watch the miserable death of all those she had tried to protect. When someone with a furry animal in their arms gave her the name number 26, she no longer had anyone of her species alive in that prison. At the bottom of that hell, she prayed to anyone who could hear her, begging to be saved. willing to sacrifice her own life to protect the others. Back in the battle, Si-hun showed signs of exhaustion from the attacks she considered useless. Amorph, trying to take advantage of an opening, almost managed to pierce her with his stinger, but Si-hun cut it at the last moment. When the stinger was cut, an acidic slime spread, hitting Si-hun and completely melting her clothes. Amorph was very surprised when he realized the acid had not harmed Si-hun as he expected. He did not know she had skin made of superalloy, the same material used in the Goblin Wolf Franz suit. This superalloy worked as a super reinforced armor, extremely resistant, but it also made her body much heavier. Si-hun responded coldly to Amorph's surprise, showing she did not tolerate betrayal. For her, a pet that bit the owner needed to learn a lesson. Then she landed a very strong blow to his belly. Even injured, Amorph did not waste time and grabbed her from behind, noticing how much heavier she was than she appeared. Taking advantage of his strength, he lifted her and threw her away. But before she could regain her balance, Si-hun launched powerful flames in his direction. Amorph saw an opening in that action. He immediately moved to attack her, but Si-hun quickly dodged, avoiding his bite. Despite that, Amorph did not seem frustrated. He had planned it. With his bite, he had opened a hole in the ship's hull, allowing the vacuum of space to start sucking everything out. As the artificial wind became deadly, Si-hun tried to hold on to some structure, but Amorph was already close to her, taking advantage of the chaos he himself had caused. He noticed she was struggling to activate two abilities at the same time and knew he had to kill her before she succeeded. He urgently started launching spikes toward her, trying to finish her off, but the attacks could not penetrate her reinforced skin. At that critical moment, number 26 shouted for Amorph to leave her baby alone. Then she launched a shock attack so powerful it shook the entire ship's structure and hit Si-hun hard. One of Amorph's spikes ended up piercing Si-hun's eye in the process. However, the vacuum also pulled number 26 outside. Desperate, she called for Amorph's help, who quickly managed to grab her to prevent her from being sucked into space. He also grabbed Si-hun's body, temporarily saving her. After seeing number 26's electric attack, Amorph began to wonder what she really was, but decided to leave those thoughts for later. For now, he needed to get out of there as fast as possible. He started dragging Si-hun's body away from the hole, trying to keep everyone safe. While doing this, he noticed the environmental maintenance system was malfunctioning since the hole opened and the ship had not been automatically sealed. If everything were normal, he himself would have repaired it by now. But there was no one to help except a few pirates who were certainly too busy hiding from him to care about what was happening. He concluded that the ship was already lost. Number 26, noticing the situation, asked what had happened to his arm. Amorph looked at his own body and realized it was starting to fall apart. He told her the effect of the scion was ending. Even so, he felt relieved because it did not hurt to return to his original form. For him, losing that transformation was not a reason for sadness since he had gained something even more important. In those games where the Megacorp tested their soldiers, players could acquire more than 100 different genes collected from extremely rare and dangerous creatures. Even Si-hun, being a very high-level NPC, had a respectable amount of genes, though not that many. By devouring her, Amorph imagined he would get at most 3 new genes but did not care about that. What he really wanted was Galargon's claw. However, just as he was about to devour her head, he had a new premonition. He clearly saw that if he ate her body, he would be blown up immediately. That was when he remembered the bomb. He realized only 5 minutes remained until detonation and knew he would not have enough time to disarm it. He had to escape the ship immediately, but just crossing the hall to the escape pod would take at least 5 minutes, and that was too much time. The only alternative was to use the plasma weapon. Without hesitation, Amorph grabbed it and charged it to maximum power. He fired a shot so powerful that it pierced the entire ship, creating a direct shortcut. Without wasting time, he launched himself out of the ship, calculating that they were not far from the escape point. As he approached, he noticed one of the escape modules was already open. He wondered if someone had tried to enter it before but felt relieved since that saved him from forcing the entry. The scene then shifted to the chief, who was reflecting on how he had nearly died an hour earlier. His senses were slowly returning, but his body was a mess since one of his hearts had been ripped out. He recalled almost detonating the bomb while trying to disarm it and decided to reprogram the device to explode in 10 minutes. That way, he would have enough time to escape and ensure those monsters were destroyed in the process. The chief walked silently through the ship and noticed how everything was too quiet. He wondered if any of the other crew members had already died but decided it did not matter since he considered both a risk to his life. At that moment, he came face to face with Captain Samuel, who seemed to be hiding because he could not leave the ship in time. Samuel, trembling, grabbed a plasma weapon and aimed at the chief, telling him not to come closer. But the chief, unfazed, asked why he did not first remove the safety lock before threatening someone. Taking advantage of the captain's hesitation, the chief struck him hard. He muttered to himself that he would kill Samuel if he had time but could not afford that luxury now. When the chief tried to shoot Samuel, the plasma weapon, which had been carelessly charged, exploded. The blast was so violent that it completely destroyed Samuel's body. A morph, elsewhere on the ship, clearly heard the explosion's roar. Meanwhile, number 26 fainted. Although she was not seriously injured, a morph knew she would wake up soon. He observed the damage and reflected that the first place he had set foot in on that world was now completely destroyed. It was time to say goodbye to that research ship. Exploring the wreckage, a morph found a bottle of drink and wondered who had drunk there. He decided to check the security camera recordings and discovered Captain Samuel had been drinking while waiting for things to calm down. He seemed to be hoping one of his soldiers would eliminate a morph for him. Seeing that, a morph thought it was none of his business. He simply deleted the internal video and switched the ship's navigation system to standby mode. It was then explained that the TC Special Exchange Center was a huge space colony drifting through space, serving as a major meeting point for players worldwide to trade. Amorph had hunted players there before to collect their genetic essences, so he was known by many unflattering names, including the Cowardly Nerd. Even so, he redirected the ship's course to the TC Special Exchange Center, programming the autopilot to follow that path. The system estimated a 3-hour trip. Amorph thought a colony with many different species would be the perfect place for him to feed. He also reflected on how no one would imagine number 26 was actually a sea demon. These creatures were very similar in appearance and habitat to other oceanic lifeforms, but had important differences such as size. Although not naturally hostile, they possessed an extremely powerful ability called Fear of the Seabed, which made anyone within range go mad with terror. This ability was similar to the hallucinations caused by the red mist, but could be activated constantly, had a greater range, and was as rare as Galargon's Claw. Amorph then approached number 26, thinking she might be his best chance to acquire that rare trait. However, he hesitated at the thought of devouring her, knowing that even then there was no guarantee the predatory effect would work. Besides, he had become close to her and did not want to betray her. He decided he would do everything to help her, even if it put his own life at risk. Then he turned his attention to Sai-hyun's body, the woman who had given him so much trouble. Now was the time to devour her. As he tore her flesh, Amorph noticed the impressive taste. He remembered that Kisaragi's meat tasted like carefully prepared luxury food. Si-hun's flavor was different, more raw, but even more delicious. The more he chewed, the tastier she became. She was better than any other being he had ever devoured. When finished, Amorph gained new abilities: X-ray vision, camouflage skin, and finally Gaillard's Claw. The scene then shifted to planet Jack-01, the capital of the Star Union. In one of its industrial areas, a robot cat walked calmly, observing several androids greeting a great commander named Chewbacca, considered the father of all cyborgs. Meanwhile, the small cat walked through the corridors until it reached a room with a containment capsule. Inside was the body of a woman. Suddenly, the capsule slowly opened, revealing Si-hun. She looked at her own body, confused, questioning if she was really in her reserve body. She had never imagined ending up trapped in a clone's body. Si-hun analyzed the clone's data and ordered the computer to show its genetic modifications. The system reported that some genes had not yet been updated. Furious, Si-hun punched the terminal, frustrated to realize all the genes she had collected were lost. She cursed the creature responsible and vowed to tear its body apart one day. The scene changed to the TC Space Commercial Center located in the Port District. There, a man held a headset and spoke with someone who asked if the carpenter was busy. He answered sharply, questioning why they were asking that. The person on the other end explained that a Megacorp ship had entered Area 7 without responding to calls from the control tower, and something was strange since the ship was on autopilot. The man decided to check what was happening himself and wondered from which capital the ship had come while walking to the escape module. He noticed the vehicle was expensive and high-end. Upon opening the door, he saw several bottles of drink scattered on the floor and picked up some strange slime, wondering what it was. But he did not know Amorph was already waiting there silently. Meanwhile, other workers were looking for the carpenter who had left early and not returned. When they finally found him, they were very surprised by his appearance. One of them commented that he thought he would stay late at work, but the carpenter explained the boss had let him go because he was very busy. Still, there was clearly something wrong with his face and posture. As he walked, the carpenter began transforming into Amorph. He reflected on how he had not imagined his new ability would be so effective. He had learned to fuse the skin camouflage he took from Si-hun with the mimicry trait. This fusion not only copied the victim's shape, but also their internal organs, allowing detailed analysis of whom he had devoured. Additionally, he emitted a special pheromone that confused the senses of those nearby, making them see him as if he were the victim. This ability seemed almost perfect, but Amorph was well aware of its limitations. The pheromones did not work on cameras or mirrors, which could easily reveal his identity. Furthermore, there was the so-called mysterious valley, a strange effect that made others feel uncomfortable when looking at him for too long. Although the ability had many advantages, it also posed risks. What he wanted most, however, was Galargon's Claw, which he had finally obtained. Although it had no immediate application, he valued even more having assimilated Amorph's super sense. With that, his new X-ray vision would be extremely useful in the future, combining with other abilities. He was still surprised by an unexpected mutation. Monstrous tentacles began growing behind his head. These tentacles resembled those sprouting from the mouths of Galargons, known as space dragons. Amorph recognized he should thank Sehyun's body for that acquisition. Now he had 4 important super traits. He knew that when he evolved into his juvenile form and developed super tolerance, he could achieve even more power. While reflecting on these changes, number 26 woke up gasping, saying she felt like she was suffocating. Amorph asked her to be patient, explaining he still needed to organize everything to keep them safe. Then he arrived at the TC Special Commercial Center. He observed how the place seemed elegant from the outside but empty and dead inside. That was precisely why he chose it as his destination. He knew the center was divided into 4 districts and 1 central administrative district. There was the recreational district, where megacorp citizens relaxed with their hired slaves. There, combat androids were always ready to capture criminals. The residential district was near slums, where the poorest lived. This was a place so neglected that no one noticed when someone simply disappeared. Amorph thought he could move there without drawing attention as long as he was cautious with the patrol androids. His biggest challenge was deciding how to get there. The options were the sewers or the subway. Both had been built along with the city, but since there was no water in space, the sewers were almost always under intense maintenance. He thought that if this were a game, he would choose the sewers to hide better, but this was reality, and the subway was the safer choice. He knew of a special passage he usually used and began looking for it. He entered a dark alley and, after searching well, found the hidden entrance. He thought to himself that only he knew that place. When he touched the panel, the door opened, revealing the secret passage to the subway, located at the edge of the port district. That was his exclusive route. The narrative then shifted to the wildlife smuggling monitoring office in the port district. There, some men were struggling to contain a gigantic creature. One of them looked at his watch and remarked that his shift was over, telling his colleagues he was going home and leaving the heavy work to the others. A woman shouted angrily, asking if that bastard was blind since they were fighting a huge monster, while he said he was leaving as if nothing was happening. The man, indifferent, just wished her good luck and said he did not do overtime. The scene then changed to the TC Special Exchange Center in the entertainment district. There, Las was sitting, choosing among several very beautiful women. He wondered who he should pick that day. His eyes eventually settled on a woman who reminded him a lot of someone from his work, which made him decide on her without much thought. Soon after, his hand was completely covered in blood. He commented to himself that it had been even better than expected, but questioned for a moment whether he had been too rough with her. However, he reassured himself, remembering that the shop would clean everything up, as usual. The woman's situation was pitiful, and he recognized that was exactly why he frequented that place. Feeling satisfied, he decided it was time to drink and said he would take 2 shots before going home. When he left, he approached the subway entrance, noticing everything was completely dark. He grumbled, wondering who the bastard was that broke the lights. He turned on his flashlight to be able to walk in that darkness. As he moved forward, he felt increasingly uncomfortable, telling himself he needed to hurry. Then someone appeared out of nowhere and asked where he was going. Las replied he was just going home. The other man commented on the darkness and asked if he would mind if he accompanied him. Las, a bit suspicious but with no other options, said he could follow him. The man then asked if Las was a cyborg, and he confirmed he was. At that moment, Las realized something was very wrong. He looked more closely at the stranger and noticed a strange creature emerging from his arm. He immediately remembered a friend who had told him about a killer who tore people's heads off. He knew that if he did nothing, he would be the next victim. Without hesitation, he started running as fast as he could. Amorph, meanwhile, watched him flee and commented to himself that he understood why number 26 was with him. He thought about how Las's heartbeat had spiked when he saw 26 and wondered why he had been so afraid of her. Then he remembered that Man had said he was a cyborg, and Amorph needed to consume another cyborg prepared to evolve into his juvenile form, Las was exactly the target he needed. Meanwhile, Las arrived home gasping, telling himself he had almost died but would worry about that only the next day. He threw himself on the couch, turned on the TV, and complained about that horrible place. He vowed that as soon as he had enough money, he would leave there once and for all. Outside, in the alley, a morph silently watched him. The scene then moved forward to another day. Las, after doing overtime at work, remembered that stranger he had almost encountered in front of his house. He wondered if he would be waiting for him there again, but reassured himself that he would be safe if he followed that specific path. However, when he looked up, he froze upon seeing a frightening creature standing right in front of him. In panic, Las immediately called the police in residential area C, saying there was a monster at his house. Meanwhile, a morph entered his residence, noticing the place was cramped and full of trash, except for the bed, which was relatively clean. For him, hunting a cyborg as prey was essential for his research. During the day, he had investigated who lived in that building and discovered several prey to feed on. There lived, for example, a cold-blooded reptilian man, a wolf therianthrope, and many other species. To reach the subadult stage, he needed to consume much more complex prey, totaling 60 playable species, plus 4 additional specific types. Many players gave up at this stage because it was extremely difficult. He recognized it was a sensible choice since the difficulty increased drastically after reaching the subadult form. Even so, he knew there were many different alien races in the TC Commercial Center, which would make collecting the genes he needed easier. Furthermore, Megacorp had diplomatic relations with a dangerous cult, which meant there would be no shortage of cultists in the administrative district for him to hunt and complete his list. A morph then commented to himself that he would check that building more carefully. He noticed the place had poor sound insulation, being able to hear noises coming from the apartment above even though he had already confirmed no one lived on the floor below. Shortly after, he noticed footsteps approaching. There were 3 people in total, Las, now identified as a cyborg, and 2 police officers. Faced with this, a morph grabbed number 26 and quickly hid. He had no intention of fighting authorities at that moment. Instead, he decided just to observe and wait to see what would happen next. Guys, the alien chapters have come to an end for now. But if this video gets lots of likes and requests for the next part, you can be sure that as soon as new chapters come out, I will bring them to you. Take the chance to subscribe to the channel because almost half of the viewers are not yet subscribed. Give that support. See you in the next video. Thanks.